everybody. Tucker Carlson, right? Tucker Carlson is interviewing Kurt Weldon and talking about 9/11. Kurt Weldon's the key guy who funded all the fusion centers, the key guy who went to Fort Belvoir. This is after 93 and got fusion centers funded. Fusion centers became a part of the American backbone after 9/11. So he was the key guy putting in the fusion centers before 9/11. How could you retell the story of 9/11 without retelling the story of P-TECH? Here's an organization with top secret clearance in the FAA, top secret clearance with all the major DoD agencies, including working out of Fort Belvoir with the encrypted communications that we've proven. How could you miss telling P-TECH? They were also in Building 6 with the early proto fusion center that was looking into Enron and the international covert dealings of Enron. How could you not see the partnership between Osama bin Laden and key CIA figures like Cofer Black? How could you miss James Corbett? How could you miss all the people who've contributed over the last 15 years to 9/11, like Dan Hanley, 9/11 Pilots for Truth, and the 330-degree turn? This almost reminds me of Tucker Carlson's interview of Dr. Sun Shang. How could you miss saying Anktiva? How could you miss saying it's only been on the market for less than a year? How could you miss saying it's only good for bladder cancer? How could you miss saying it's only good when it's coupled with GBS that's been around for 100 years? How could you miss these things? So it's a little bit unsettling to see Tucker miss. Remember, we went out to Saylorsburg for the Home for Wayward Girls, where Gulan had his Home for Wayward Girls just outside of New York, in Saylorsburg, in Pennsylvania 7. That's Kurt Weldon's area. So I don't know. Tucker, maybe Scooter is doing the producing of the films. The more information we seem to give, and he's right on the money with Fort Belvoir being where the fusion center concept brought from the Phoenix program, brought from Vietnam, saying, hey, why don't we do what we did, with strategic villages in the Phoenix program? Why don't we bring them into the United States? Fort Belvoir was the intelligence command where that happened. Yes, the 93 false flag, it was run by the FBI. It was run by Louis Freeh. We have Robin Gritz, who was there, who said, hey, watch out, here comes the blind sheik. And even the people who participated thought it was a live exercise until the charges went off. So if this isn't the biggest whitewash ever with this Kurt Weldon interview, I don't know what is. And I don't know what to say about Tucker other than you need to do your homework. And this is what happens, Larry, when you don't do your homework.
Hello, welcome to Neighborhood News. George Webb investigates. Oh, I need to. Welcome to Neighborhood News. There we go. Welcome to Neighborhood News. George Webb investigates. Fusion Central Casting, George. Fusion Central Casting with Tucker.
Well, good morning, Mark, and good morning, Aaron. You see the sheep dip bath I've got here, the Tucker sheep dip bath. You come in one side of the sheep dip. Yeah, I can hear you.
You're there now, yep.
I can hear you.
Off and on when you need it, I guess. Or, yep.
Okay.
Yes, the sheep dipping with Kurt Weldon is pretty incredible here.
You come in as a 9/11 conspirator. I wouldn't even call him a 9/11 conspirator. I'd say he's a conspirator before that. He's a conspirator for fusion centers. He's a Bob Mueller conspirator for fusion centers. And you could read the book Doug Valentine to learn more about the Phoenix program in Vietnam. But basically, it was created by the Rand Corporation. And we've created a rebrand corporation right where you guys are to fight against the Rand Corporation. But you basically have a stack of white papers, right, on counterintelligence and how to subdue the Viet Cong. And you're sitting in the Rand Corporation in Santa Monica, and they're all over the place. There's thousands and thousands of white papers you've written on how to subdue the Viet Cong. The only problem is the war's over. What are you going to do with all this fusion center stuff you've written? It's all worthless now that the war's over. Hey, whoa. I got a great idea. My name's Bruce Hoffman. I'll say it's coming to America. right? I'll say the Viet Cong activity is coming to America. Well, that's going to be hard for everybody to believe, Bruce. All the Vietnamese getting on planes and flying to America. Oh, wait a minute, I got it. I'll say it's religious zealots. I'll say it's religious zealots coming to America. We can just do a global search and replace with these new word processor things. Take out Viet Cong and put in religious zealots. We'll put in Muslim terrorists. And then somebody else said, wait a minute. We can throw Kosovo in here and Bosnia in here. We can throw in white supremacists into the little blank that used to say Viet Cong. And we can churn this crap out for another 40 years. Well, what are we going to need to do here? Well, we got to somehow have some kind of terrorist event at a big symbol of the American economy, like World Trade Center 1. Okay, well, and Bruce writes about this. Bruce Hoffman at Rand Corporation writes about this, right? So what do you do then? You say, well, we'll wire it up for explosives. We'll get these people out of this mosque, the Blind Sheik in Newark, right? There was another one a little bit further to the south. We'll get them to say that they're going to wire it up, and it'll be something called a live exercise. There we go. It'll be a live exercise. And the people who were a part of it thought that they were, the people recruited out of the mosque thought that they were doing a live exercise for the FBI. Then the FBI hit the button and blew it up. And everyone who was the Muslim live actors went, what are you doing? And that became World Trade Center 1. Okay. Because Bob Mueller, who worked the Phoenix program in Vietnam and did fusion centers, and Tom Ridge, who also did it with them, who was going to become the first director of DHS, they needed some kind of impetus to shock the American people that terrorism had come home, right? And it couldn't be at Viet Cong because they had to use some other kind of religious zealot. Well, the first person who was queued up, the first guy who was queued up to come out and say, if we would have had a fusion center, if we would have had a fusion center, this wouldn't have happened. If we would have had a fusion center and the FBI and the CIA and the NYPD and the fire department, if we would have had a fusion center, and Rudy Giuliani was the guy who carried the water on this, by the way, we would have avoided the whole thing. It was like clockwork, right? Kurt Weldon, and it was Fort Belvoir, the intelligence command at Fort Belvoir, INSCOM. We've talked about it with all the countermeasures with vaccines, like it was on cue. Now, I've been trying for 8 years to say, with all the Substacks and so forth, to say it was stooges and kind of cogs in Congress like Kurt Weldon that brought the fusion centers forward. Little did I know that yesterday Tucker Carlson would have Kurt Weldon on and he admitted to being the guy who was the cog and the wheel to demand fusion centers immediately after WTC1 out of his own mouth in the first couple of minutes. You might want to even play it.
Yeah, we can play it.
Yeah,
we'll get to some clips of it, I guess, as the show goes on. This is INSCOM, Fort Belvoir, INSCOM's homepage there. We'll take that off.
But you could see the Tucker bath here. You can see the Tucker bath. Can you see the Tucker bath?
Oh yeah, we can see the sheep in the Tucker
Come
bath.
in one side as a conspirator to 9/11 or an enabler to 9/11. You come out a truth crusader on the other side. This is has Tucker gone cray cray? I'm working on a piece this morning on Substack. Has Tucker gone cray cray because he's sheep dipping all these CIA guys as truth crusaders?
Well, he's also being, I was a child and I didn't understand these, what I was saying at the time, and like Tucker's admitting he carried water kind of for whatever in this. And he's trying to, I don't know, do a Pontius Pilate maybe and wash his hands or they're all coming here to, you know, like, I don't know, Weldon, do you have a disease here? Are you feeling guilty because you're going to be cashing your chips in and you got something to say? I don't, I wonder, what's true in this whole 9/11.
They're coming for the great washing. They're coming for the absolution to wash the blood off their hands. Yes, I agree with you, Mark. That's exactly what's happening.
And he's written a book, I mean, can we not get DTRA, Nunluger? Can we not get the godfathers of the Nunluger program as our whistleblowers? That's just the one thing that we have to ask, right? We're cool with the whistleblowers. We were here. We did Dark MAGA Studios every step of the way. We're team players. We're trying to give everybody every benefit of the doubt, but here it is again, another disclosure and another Nunluger, another godfather of the Nunluger DTRA program.
Well,
in his own words.
Can I comment about that book, right? And it's Inside Iran.
Oh, so, the Countdown to Terror book that he wrote?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And if you remember, first of all, again, I'm not kidding. In the interview, it normally you'd have to take somebody to a fusion center and dunk them in this bath and drown them and waterboard them to get them to admit they worked with Donald Rumsfeld, right? But no, in the Tucker interview, he's as the key person of his bona fides, the key person who's standing up for Kurt Weldon, saying what a great guy he is Donald Rumsfeld. He says that out of his own mouth. Okay. He also quotes George H.W. Bush as his other character reference out of his own mouth. So, you can't. But
John
this
Sununu.
He name drops all your favorites. James Jones is there. NATO commander James Jones gets his name dropped. Of course, James Woolsey. I mean, James Woolsey writes the foreword of this book.
Genie Energy. I mean, so if you can't do an illegal pipeline, right? If Bin Laden and Cofer Black at CIA had to do an illegal pipeline, and they're trying to drain Iran, they're trying to drain the whole Persian Gulf of all the oil, and it's not a complicated concept, right? But there's certain areas you have to go that are held by Muslims, right? And it's harder to go in and take that territory. It's easier to go in with Osama bin Laden and say you're jihadists taking the territory and you're jihadists building the pipeline. As long as the oil comes out the other end, I don't care what kind of device we had to use to get the oil, right? So the reason why Kurt Weldon knows all this stuff is because they had a pipeline group called ITERA, right? And ITERA was the Russian oil company doing all these kind of surreptitious pipelines, and he later got in trouble. Tucker Carlson, this is just like Dr. Sun Shang, never mentions ITERA the whole time during the interview, right? The FBI came after me because I blew the whistle on 9/11. Bullshit. You were the guy who was a co-conspirator, or at least an enabler of 9/11. The whole raid was about ITERA. So it's just, again, this kind of Tucker Carlson sheep dip, that over and over again. We'll get to it.
Has ITERA re-envisioned themselves as a digital company? Maybe I have the wrong ITERA here.
This was the oil company. His
I have ITERA here, specialist in sustainable digital transformation.
Yeah, this is a signal reduction. The original ITERA his daughter had North American Solutions, and North American Solutions was basically a lobbying company. And what they were trying to do is the original George Soros idea was that they would get a pipeline over to the Adriatic, right? And I went through the pipeline route from Belgrade through Bosnia Herzegovina over to Croatia. You had to go through Croatia, and you had to go through Bosnia Herzegovina, and you had to go through Serbia to get this Russian oil. And that was going to be they were talking about that for a southern route. This is the reason for the Bosnian War, and this is the reason for the Kosovo War, right? carve out some kind of land bridge for the Soros pipeline, right? And so I traveled the whole thing, with a broken foot. But anyway, I traveled the whole thing. It's the NATO wars. It's the reason for the NATO wars. So ITERA is So let me see here.
Maybe it's not on there. I just grabbed one that I could get here.
This is a good one. You see where the blue line takes the southern route, takes a turn down through Greece. There was a route, and then the northern route goes north of Serbia. But if you were to take a line to go directly through there, through Serbia and then through Croatia there, and then through Bosnia Herzegovina, the original idea was a line straight through there.
Well,
straight.
Back to World War One. One of these causes was the building of the Berlin to Baghdad railway. So my question is, why wouldn't you just use the right of way of the railroad to put the pipeline in?
Well, that was a talk about for a while. So this is different in the sense that this is the Russian oil. I don't want to get too complex with because there was a Syrian pipeline as well in this.
No, sorry.
Mine's a rhetorical question.
No, it's a great question, and the line you're talking about, the Syrian pipeline kind of travels your route across Saudi Arabia, up through Syria, up into the boot of Europe, through Europe that way. But this, I don't know if it was Pietro Benassi or why there's this Italian connection, but like you're saying, instead of going north to Germany, Mark, like you're talking about, they take a left turn at Albuquerque. They take a left turn at Italy because I think it's Pietro Benassi at the end of the day, but they want it to go through. First, it's the boot of Italy, and then at one time they were talking about it going into the side of the calf of Italy. But this original plan was the Soros pipeline through Bosnia was the first leg, which was 92, 93, 94, 95, 96. Very mountainous area. And then Kosovo was the last leg. But where Weldon got involved with, he got involved with Milosevic because you needed friends on the Serbian side for the completion of the pipeline if you didn't carve off Kosovo to the south. If you don't have a war and carve off Kosovo off of Serbia to the south, you need Milosevic as a friend. So Weldon was first used as a chummy chum guy with Milosevic, and I can't remember what the guy's name was, but he was also raided in the raid. God, what was his name? Anyway, they raided.
An associate of Milosevic, you're saying?
Yeah, it was an intimate of Milosevic. The guy who was raided.
Stambolic, maybe? No.
I posted it yesterday on Twitter. Charles somebody. It's the same. Charles, whatever his name is. Weldon tried to say he was a spy yesterday. Oh gosh. Anyway, I'll get it when you
get to it. Yeah. I'll check there. But
my point is that they first were trying to do the chummy chum with Milosevic to let Milosevic approve the pipeline across. Right. And then Milosevic, for whatever reason, contested area, whatever, that was 97-ish time frame. But then they decided, let's just go ahead and have a war and we'll carve Kosovo off the bottom and then we'll just run it through our own territory. Let's see. Milosevic, their businessman linked
Charles P. Sexton Jr.
Sexton was the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was raided simultaneously. So what Weldon didn't, talk about or anything was this Soros pipeline going across, from the Russians had done a deal to get it to the across the Crimea, right? Across the what is it there? The Black Sea, but but you got to still get it to Italy to get it to Western Europe, right? This whole idea is a southern route, right? And this whole idea is the NATO guys want to be the guys who are selling it to the EU rather than the Russians selling it directly. The Nord Stream pipeline obviously is a direct sale, right? The other ones going through Germany, as Mark mentioned, from Russia, are a direct sale, right? And the NATO guys, the guys in Genie Energy, like Jim Woolsey and the guys like Wesley Clark and all these guys, wanted to be the Genie Energy guys, wanted to be the guys selling it to Europe. And that's what this whole thing is about. They're not going to tell you that, but that's what this whole thing is about.
Well, and for our audience here, what they would probably find the most interesting and enlightening is that she's got a BlackBerry. This crew's got BlackBerries.
Yeah.
There's some early BlackBerry carriers, and they are, and they smashed their BlackBerries when the heat got when it started to get a little too hot. They had to smash their BlackBerries. But anybody who received BlackBerries back then is not, they're working with the CIA, or they're working with the
what they did was NATO had a diplomatic arm called, it's still the guy Smirnov is a part of this. OSCE is what it's called. So it's the Organization of Security Council for Europe or whatever, but OSCE is who the original BlackBerries were given. General Shelton, Kurt Weldon mentions General Shelton. The protege of General Shelton is David Petraeus. We've been following these BlackBerries ever. I've stood in front of the statue of General Shelton at Fort Bragg. I can't count how many times. This is where the original BlackBerries were given out, in Kosovo, right? And this was all pipelining, right? This is the idea of getting the Russian oil and gas and having it go through a very small group of NATO insiders, which is the Atlantic Council. James Jones was one of those, right? But we want it to go through our little Genie Energy, and then as a gatekeeper, basically. And the BlackBerries, Grimes here, not the one who bore the child for Elon Musk, but Grimes, Grimes is the person who admitted to destroying the records. Now, Kurt Weldon doesn't mention Grimes, right? Kurt Weldon just says they attacked his daughter because he came out against 9/11. Bullshit, he came out against 9/11. He was the guy for pushing all the fusion centers since 93.
He was saying that his daughter, that the FBI came and raided the house, and they took all these boxes, and they never charged her with anything. And then he got the boxes back after 6 months, and there was never any charges or anything. And just like, doesn't understand why they came to the house or anything. And
well, it did sound like it was before the election that year. It was when it was October of an election year. So it takes two to tango. The FBI seems like they were playing politics also with him. Yeah. But then he ends up in a defense contractor, and here we are. All these years later. They took care of him. He took care of them. They took care of him. It was time to move him along into a new career anyway. I think as
soon as you say I'm worth more to you guys as a friend than I am as an enemy, that's sort of a veiled threat, right? As soon as you start saying, hey, I can start making you guys look bad too because I know the score, that's when these raids happen, right? To smear you and make you look bad, right? And they happen right before an election and there's no doubt in my mind the timing of this is very Cap Weinberger. If you remember, George Bush perp walked Cap Weinberger out of the I can't remember, the executive office building or the White House in handcuffs 2 days before the election for Iran-Contra, because they wanted everyone to have the impression in their mind that, Cap Weinberger did Iran-Contra, not George Bush. Right. This is the same sort of thing. I'm not saying Kurt Weldon didn't get railroaded, but he was a part of it all, is what I'm trying to say. The FBI didn't just spin a roulette wheel, and said, which congressman can we go after today? And he wasn't really talking about if you look his public statements, he wasn't really talking about 9/11 and cover-ups of 9/11 and so forth, or questioning the 9/11 report. That's all bullshit, right? What was going on was this pipeline investigation, and what they were doing was he was making these speeches in Congress saying how great ITERA was, how great this Russian pipeline company was, and how we should, give them special relief from all the sanctions against Russia, etc. And he was really pumping up ITERA. Well, you can't have your daughter getting checks, $1 million checks from ITERA at the same time. That looks like pay to play. I mean, using your daughter is kind of a flimsy, So like Mark said, he acted like in the interview, like, oh, I have no idea what this is about. And here's Grimes smashing her BlackBerry at the same time. It's a hilarious situation.
In this game here, where they can talk about having plausible deniability, couldn't they also have plausible culpability? Where if they decide well, we're done with you, we can break you just as good as we can make you.
Exactly. Just enough shadow of tinge of guilt to knock you out of the box. Yep.
So let's summarize a little bit, just what we've learned here, or what we're learning with Tucker, who I think at a certain point we need to ask, is Tucker part of the operation? I would vote yes. I think he's a Smith mob operator, but it's getting pretty weird. Certainly, like, we aren't trying to turn our show into the Tucker rebuttal show, but it's just been too much to resist here. This is a speech that we won't, I recommend the audience, if they want to learn more about Congressman Curt Weldon, this is A New Vision for Russia, a speech that he gave in the Congress many years ago. Just some highlights here: an original supporter of the Nunn-Lugar Cooperative Threat Reduction Program. I have worked tirelessly against proposed funding reductions in that effort. So he certainly admits that he's a godfather of the CTR, Nunn-Lugar Cooperative Threat Reduction, which is, the origins of the DTRA group that we've been researching for years and years. And, they just, there's so much about this guy, we could do multiple shows just on the interesting career of Curt Weldon, but he's original. Yeah, please add. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So it's not just this, basically it was payola for all these scientists, and they were moving all the Russian scientists that were doing bioweapons and nuclear to Iran because Iran had the cash. Okay. So they say, well, this will be a great way of getting all of Iran's oil. We'll make deals for Iran's oil, and we'll move. Iran wants to have a nuclear program. Iran wants to have a bioweapons program. Iran hates Israel. So blah, blah, blah. And this was this whole move. So that's why he's involved in Iran. And if you look in the story, he says his book's about Iran. And again, Iran occupies a key pipeline position. If you're trying to drain Pakistan and Afghanistan of all of its oil and all of its minerals like uranium and so forth, the quickest way is through Iran, right? And you can do it under the cover of your Iranian partners. So that's why he knows so much about Baluchistan, which is this drug running area of Iran. And this all goes back to the drug running routes. So there's so much more in this story with
so much more
with Curt Weldon that you can't even the whitewash that happened yesterday. And you know what? I don't think it's bad that we're not really a counter organization as far as neighborhood news to Tucker. Here's the rest of the story that they didn't tell you. Absolutely. I think. Yeah, everybody deserves to know that, right? Everybody deserves to know the full picture.
We of course we don't know the whole answer. We don't know, the real secrets of the deep state. This is why we continue to do our research and try the best we can. One thing I can say that's interesting here, there's also this here's a Curt Weldon biography from his curtweldon.net website. One thing I found very interesting about him is 1968. Weldon's father drives him down to the Soviet embassy in DC, where he receives Russian literature and world affairs. That's kind of a weird mark there. But then, 1969, Weldon graduates with a BA in Russian studies from Westchester State College, making him the first in his family to graduate from college. Very nice. And he's also the first graduate of a new degree program in Russian area studies.
That was from the 60s, because we had that at Devilbus High School.
Right. Mark was telling me about that, actually, how like in the 60s they were coming out with these Russian studies programs in high schools and colleges. And George, I don't know, maybe you were subjected to that, or maybe you had that in your high school or your college.
When George started talking about the Beach Boys, I was like, a Beach Boys fan, whatever. I mean, it was in my age there. Okay. And like when you brought up Manson, that kind of like added a whole nother like dimension to my fandom at the time. But because I remember like Brian Wilson, he almost like lost his mind because, they were pushing him that the Beatles had brought out Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club album. Okay. And they were like competing with the Beatles. So, and so they were having to come up with some kind of an album, and it had to be like this new music, and I'm just realizing, how, they had, all the hair grew out, the whole vibe of teen music altered like in 1967 or 68. And
Pet Sounds. That's where you're going toward Pet Sounds,
like
right?
Made the Manson connections, all of that. But that was just the whole turning they had they weren't doing surfing and dance. All of a sudden they had to switch to a whole different type of music in order to stay relevant. But this Bruce Johnston came in to be like the lead singer in the band, and Brian went in the background, and he really wasn't doing much other than supposedly like being the writer and the creative talent, but he wasn't like, visibly like in the shows anymore and stuff.
This is why I want to develop.
There's a lot, we could go with a lot from that period of time, because it made me see the whole Great Society back, just remembering it. It's like I felt those days again, which I hadn't in years.
Well, I have a series out there called Laurel Canyon, and so you can go Google Laurel Canyon. But you're right, Pet Sounds was the diversion, and it's very close. And some people say created by the Rand Corporation. The whole idea of creating a going from this wholesome kind of music where it's dance, all out, all that, Daddy took the T-Bird away, that kind of like innocent, girl, cheerleader, social girl going and having fun with her dad's gas card, right? To more of, we've got to get it to be somehow introspective, and we got to get LSD in this thing. How are we going to get LSD in this thing? And this is where Curtis LeMay in Santa Monica on the beach says, we got to get LSD into this movement, and we got to get LSD into the Beach Boys. We've got Sgt. Pepper's, and we've got the Beatles, we've got the Rolling Stones, but we really need to get this wholesome element, right? And that's why when we start talking about the Rand Corporation, we start talking about the Phoenix program, and we're talking about Kurt Weldon, right, being the water bearer for fusion centers in 1993. That's why I say we need to have a Rand Corporation, a rebrand, which is reevaluating the bioweapons of Rand at your location. We need to have a little beach area when you first come in the front door. We need to have the lights, the heat lamps, right? We need to have the beach chairs. So you guys have the great anti-Rand thoughts, you have
the whole back right back here that, maybe we'll put the beach back there, but we can do the research and the coming together of researchers here. That's the main thing.
And then we can dial in, people from all over the Midwest can go to the beach center. We have Luna Pier too, by the way, in the summer. Summer's coming up. We got a great beach.
Field trips over there, 10 minutes away.
Yeah, in Luna Pier. So we're just kind of kidding.
Yeah, there's so much to do, but
but I'm just saying. But Mark is right here. They have to somehow in the Vietnam War, they have to somehow go from that 50s American innocence where Diddy Bop, music and so forth, teenager type music, and they somehow have to get it more serious, and they have to take the anti-war movement and knock it down with LSD. So the Rand Corporation does get into these cultural things, right? And the Rand Corporation is Bruce Hoffman is the guy who writes the article saying we've got to replace Viet Cong, right, with all of our white papers, and we've got to put in religious zealot, and we've got to put in white supremacist. This is going on today, right? All the old Rand Corporation white papers that were written about Viet Cong, the transition was Muslim zealot. And then the end point here is white person.
They replace religious zealot with
right.
white supremacist.
Right. Anybody waving a flag, an American flag, is the target. Right. And so that's why this is good to look at. This is the Rand Corporation transitioning. And I love Mark going for the Beach Boys because it's right, you know, Curtis LeMay was right there on the beach. You know, you couldn't get it.
It brings up like a bigger question, like, and I'm wondering with the Rand Corporation now, because it kind of went with the whole Capitol Records got bought by EMI out of Great Britain. The
Beatles.
And you get, and that's kind of about the time that Capitol, changed, because EMI was, they were with the Beatles, and all of that. But I'm just wondering if Rand was connected with EMI and the takeover of this Capitol.
Yes, they were. And if EMI originally was, they were also involved in intellectual property. I talked to the doctor who was at Cleveland Clinic where they brought the original CAT scan. Yeah. They're taking these sagittal slices of, heavy dosage for CAT scans. And so EMI, it was funny because it was a British kind of DARPA, right? And they got into music. So
it's electronic musical industry. And I'm thinking it's like something they socialized, when they went big on socialism and they just took over a private business and it became.
You see how there were electronic instruments first? You see how they were doing CAT scanners first? They were the ones who came up with the CAT scanner. And they decided as a wash, because they were like so closely associated with defense Q gadgetry, the oscilloscope and so forth, that they decided we'll have a front corporation with music. And then the first band they backed were the Beatles. And the Beatles made more money than the electronics that they had. So it was total surprise, right? If you talk to the insiders originally, in England, that the Beatles would be successful. They were just going to hide it, right, as a way of fronting their defense work. So it's a good story. It's a great story.
Here's an article. Do we really need to thank the Beatles for the financing of the development of the computed tomography scanner? So yeah, there you have it.
Yeah, CAT scan. And I talked to the guys at Cleveland Clinic where it was developed, and it's a true story.
Fascinating stuff. You never know where we'll go here, right? Just to close my thought here on that tab on Kurt Weldon that got us talking about the 60s. Everybody loves to reflect on the 60s. I was not actually alive in the 60s, but it wasn't too far away. But it's just these Russian area studies programs. It makes me think, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt that like not all assets know their assets, or maybe he does know that he's an asset, but it's almost like he's been coached for this for so long, late 60s. He's the first graduate in this Russian area studies program, and they have all these programs out there because it's the Cold War, and we've got this big centers. Right, they're grooming centers. We're grooming for the day that the wall is going to fall and that it's all going to be freedom and love and everything together. And then 10, 20 years later, he's in the Nunn-Lugar program. He's coaching American companies on how to divide up the spoils of the Cold War. He literally he coaches American companies on how to divide up the spoils of the Cold War. That's one of his claims to fame in 1992 that he's doing that. So he's been coached for this. He's been groomed for it. He writes his PhD thesis in Russian studies. He's got a 1985 student exchange group, which I can't find anything on. There's no link in the Wikipedia or anything, but if any of our researchers out there can learn any more about the Kurt Weldon founded 1985 Soviet Students Exchange Group, that would be fascinating, because it's like, well, did the Vindmans come in on that? And we know that the Vindmans came in on some type of early 80s
Maybe
student
Herb can help us
exchange
with
group, but it's just fascinating all that this guy was involved in, and you can see how it was the culture. It wasn't just like that he's some deep state guy, from his parents. He does seem like an honest guy, grew up in an honest home, salt of the earth, 9 kids, went to, local college. And at the local college, the grooming began, and maybe he doesn't even realize it, because you can tell that he doesn't even, he's got all these friends, Woolsey and Jim Jones and
But you know who we
Rumsfeld and everybody, and he actually thinks name dropping them is giving him clout. Whereas we're looking at this and we're like, what? Your name's dropping Rumsfeld? Your name, he's like, what are you doing,
There's
dude?
only one name he could drop that could make me, consider him, legitimate, and he's dead, and that's his Democratic cadre or opposite in that time, and that was Carl Levin, who was also, was the Democrat chairman of the Armed Services Committee. But he's dead now. But he would be the only one that could come back, probably in my mind, and be able to tell his story. And we know about him because he's from Michigan. But
Well, Levin, that's a whole nother. I mean, you're right. I mean, Aaron, you were not alive, but Mark and I were alive during this period of time. And just to set the stage for you, in 1982, right? I'm graduating from college. The person speaking to my college graduation is Vice President George Bush. And he's talking at my college graduation about, because he has a long, the CIA goes all the way back to Miami and Sowers, who originally started the precursor of the CIA and blah, 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 our Navy intelligence program. We're in the middle of Ohio, for crying out loud. Why are we doing Navy intelligence?
Connection to this, and the fact that we run into this, these are land grant universities where this stuff seems to happen.
Yeah, and we had our Navy ROTC, and so, but my point is that we had a real strong connection with the Taft family. The great grandson was one of the kids I went to business school with. But anyway, George Bush is talking about SS-20s. You remember SS-20s is the Russians had an intermediate nuclear missile to shoot at NATO, but NATO didn't have an intermediate nuclear missile to shoot back. So it was kind of like, oh, hey. So George Bush at my college graduation was talking about, let's eliminate a whole class of nuclear weapons from the face of the earth. Well, at that time, Reagan was talking about a first strike, and Brezhnev had just died, and Yuri Andropov there's the SS-20. I think that's the museum in Washington, D.C., I believe. That's Smithsonian.
Yep.
And, maybe a 40-footer, not an 80-footer, not a Saturn V type, right? Or 115-footer. Yeah, about a 40-footer, I think. So my point here, we'll get the stats on what an SS-20, how big it is. But this scared the shit out of NATO, because it's like, Americans, you don't have to worry about this, so you can't get to America. But man, it can hit Berlin, it can hit London, it can hit Paris, right? But Reagan was talking about a first strike. Yuri Andropov had the whole Yuri Andropov had a whole thing called Project Ryan, because he thought Reagan was going to do a first strike, right? And the protege of Andropov, you remember, a whole bunch of premiers died in a row after Brezhnev, like 4 in a row with Reagan. He thought, now's the time to do it. Now's the time to hit him, right? And then Gorbachev was the protege, right? So my point is George Bush is looking at all this going, hey, if we have a nuclear war here, we ain't going to get any of the oil. He's back to Dresser Industries and trying to, drill in Compton, like, hey, whoa, on the nuclear war thing. We've cycled Ronald Reagan up on the evil empire a little too much here. We got to turn Ronald Reagan into a peacenik here, because he's about ready to blow up all of our oil fields here. And this is where the surreptitiousness, like you're talking about, is let's get our Russian operatives who know how to relate to Russia and start making some deals here for the fall of the Soviet Union. Let's start figuring out how to put the straws in the milkshake and get the oil out and pipeline this stuff. And let's kind of tamp down this, first strike. And then if you remember, Reagan, they put in Andropov dies and they put in Gorbachev, and they start doing glasnost and they start doing perestroika, and they start saying, hey, let's do bring back SALT II, Nixon kind of, and then Reagan all of a sudden becomes kind of a peacenik. And they do, Chernobyl is sort of like, we'll show you the horrid face of just even a small 3% enriched uranium cloud. And, the cloud infects people 200 times radiation poisoning in Sweden. It's first detected in Sweden and Finland. And that's not 98% enriched uranium with an explosion where you're trying to kill people. That's an accident in Chernobyl. And after Chernobyl, 86, 87, that really changes Reagan, right, into a peacenik or less of a war hawk. Because he sees kind of the destruction, and Gorbachev is also affected that way. And so I'm not saying that Bush did Chernobyl to show the horrid face of nuclear war, but it kind of had that effect. It's like, hey, we should be negotiating deals to get all the oil and gas out of Russia. We can make a lot of money here at NATO and the Atlantic Council. If we're the pipeline owners, if we're the people with the turnpikes, remember the old people along the Rhine, all the old castles on the Rhine were basically places to pay your toll. We can be that. We got to stop on the nuclear war thing, and we got to start on the pipeline thing. So that's where you needed the Kurt Weldons, the guys who had done Russian studies, to start reaching out and making friendships into the old Soviet Union. And if you've looked at, Khardakovsky and all the people, Igor Sechin with Carter Page, all these are kind of outreaches from our Russia studies kids to say, hey, well, let's start pipelining and stop, mainlining nuclear missiles. And that really is George Bush. And so I think, Khodorkovsky is part of selling Russia by the pound. Putin puts him away for a while. He puts a couple of the other guys away. Bill Browder is part of this. This is all Lee Stranahan reported this all 8 years ago. So I'm giving him credit. But my point is that George Bush is looking toward how do we get this resources out of Russia. Right, we're going to need somebody to be the go-between. It can't be the CIA guys going in there and saying, "Hey, we're here. We're here at the Atlantic Council. We'd like to build a pipeline with you." And how do you physically move the oil? What's the route going to be? Right, and Afghanistan, Baluchistan, Iran, all these places that we don't know, but Kurt Weldon knows from his Russia studies. And this is where the Strux also come into play, because Peter Strux Sr. is in Tehran. He is, this comes up in the Kurt Weldon interview, where they don't mention this, but Soleimani, who's the head of the ICRG, which is the Revolutionary Guard, has a base at Isfahan. We covered it. We sang songs about it, where it's all U.S. Pilots training the Iranian Air Force in helicopters and planes, right? And the place where Soleimani touched down, where when Turki al-Faisal flew on his jet with Osama bin Laden and all these guys to make everybody think that we were fighting Osama bin Laden, Kofar Black, when we were doing the fake war, one of the bases they would touch down to refuel would be near Isfahan. Now, they said it was El Cadiz in the interview in Baluchistan, but But
Mhm.
those bases were under the control of the ICRG. Those bases were under the control of Soleimani. George Bush used Ghorbanifar to sell tow missiles to keep the Iran-Iraq war going. So what I'm saying is this is a very George Bush organized activity, right? Stop with the missiles for a second. Let's start with the pipelines. We need to establish people along the way. Sort of like if you're going to do a Pony Express, you're going to need friends in Wyoming and you're going to need friends in,
Mhm.
Montana. You're going to need friends along the way at all the little,
This is the USSR version of the Pony Express or the
Yeah,
oil,
you're going to
pipeline
need
express.
you're going to need friends along the way controlling the various territories to get the oil out.
Yep. Here's another. Here, I'll just read from his own words again from his speech that he gave, encouraging investment in Russia. In January 1998, I was the U.S. representative to Speaker Seleznev's conference on Russian economic development. I've also been working actively in my home state of Pennsylvania to encourage U.S. companies to invest in Russia. My work in this area has included the creation of the Pennsylvania Russia Business Council, which has, with my assistance, conducted 5 successful workshops on U.S. investment in Russia. So I don't know if our friend there, we had a friend who was in the hotel watching it all, watching them take the windows and the doors off the hotel as not exactly, but something like that. I mean, they're watching them steal Russia or, sell Russia by the pound. I wonder if he recalls Kurt Weldon and, was on any of these trips or anything, but just fascinating stuff, and who knows? I mean, his whole life has been couched in this Russia thing, and here he is on Tucker. So
that was a
turn it on here.
mindset, like back in the late 60s when they set up like these Sino-Soviet centers in the schools and that. Because I remember we got taken in like in 7th grade, and to explain what was in high school, when they were like looking for people. But I've forgotten the point I was going to make about
the centers in the schools. Yeah, I mean,
well, Russia studies, Mark, is we got hit with that Russia studies.
We were like told, because when I had started school, we got French language as part of our, we're learning French like in 3rd grade, bonjour, madame, and all of that. And like in 67, they got rid of like foreign language. Well, France has passed, the future is China, the future is Russia, and we need to be educating, our young people, in what the future is. France and Germany, they're yesterday, they're irrelevant now. And that was, where they were at. So if you got into these programs, you were one of what they considered to be, the academic, cream of that particular school.
Yeah, very much so. We had a Russia studies program at Miami that was very extensive. My roommate was in it. He spoke really great Russian, and he was looking at where the Russians were putting their submarine bases. He was a Navy analyst looking at metadata of where, his thing he came up with is if all of a sudden the league, there was 4 hockey teams in the league before, and then now there was 28 hockey teams, there was probably a Russian sub base that went in there because there's so many more men now there. And that's very true, is there was an emphasis on Russia studies. And I guess Glasnost, the things that we think of are like Gorbachev creations, Glasnost and Perestroika. I can't remember. Glasnost is like defrost, and then Perestroika, maybe it's Perestroika is the defrost, and Glasnost is the re-beginning. But it was this whole idea of, hey, whoa, wait a minute. These aren't going to be our enemies. These are going to be our partners. And they got oil, and they've got 11 time zones, and there's a lot of rare earth metals in Russia, and there's a lot of uranium in and there's a lot of secrets for nuclear reactors, and there's a lot of bioagents. We got to start reaching out to Russia.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So as we close the Kurt Weldon portion of our of our show here, I still wanted to talk about Arcturus and everything. If you got time, right? We keep going.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We'll definitely keep going. I think it's worth it's worth to our audience to play a little bit of the Kurt Weldon just as proof points just to show that I'm not making this up. He talks about, and in the Twitter, it'll even say the points at the time markers that Tucker put out where he talks about this stuff.
I think we'll just do the beginning where he talks about the fusion centers, because that really what I gather from just this whole thing, the 10,000 foot view that I've learned just in the last 48 hours, or watching this interview, listening to your Twitter posts and everything, is that 9/11 was even the second go around. 1993 was when they thought they were going to do the whole terrorism, and of course the fusion centers and that whole component. That was something. We getting visitors here, Mark? You might have to. I think we have visitors in the store here. Sorry. Yep. Sorry. We got folks coming looking for fines here. Yeah, 2 doors down, maybe.
Trains, planes, and automobiles.
Yeah, they're coming and looking for some right now. We'll let them shop while we talk here. That's good. Mark might address them, but in general, the fusion centers were a thing that were ready to go. They ended up rolling them out after 9/11, but they, they had the seeds in place in 1993, ready for these fusion centers to, be the end game, which we know, data collection, big data, having control of our data has been the end goal of this deep state, or one of the main goals of this deep state from day one. That's why we've been always, paying attention to all these different types of surveillance aspects of the research and things. And so it was like, okay, 1993, they had this whole thing ready to go. They bombed the World Trade Center. The building didn't fall down, or they didn't get the reaction they were looking for to pull all the things they wanted to pull. But clearly, 9/11, they weren't going to mess it up. And so, okay, 9/11, they did it. And the story here from the Council of Foreign Relations website, I will bring to you, which straight from their own words, right? The narrative. But this is a story, 9/11 is lots of little stories inside the big story. Of course, there's the Pentagon, our research community, the Pentagon being hit by a missile and not a plane, I should say. Our research community certainly has done a lot at the Flight 93 Center there with Winburn and everything else. And we don't think there was a plane there either. Nor does there seem to be any evidence of a plane there in Shanksville. But inside there's, then there's the anthrax narrative at Flight 93. There's all sorts of other aspects of Flight 93 that we've looked into. This is one that I missed. How in the early, I'll read straight from the Council of Foreign Relations here. In the early morning hours of September 9th, 2001, so 2 days before September 11th, a Maryland state trooper made a routine traffic stop, pulling over a car headed north on I-95 and issuing a speeding ticket. 2 days later, the driver of that car, Ziad Jarrah, was one of the 4 hijackers aboard the United Airlines Flight 93 when it crashed in western Pennsylvania. The officer who issued the speeding ticket had no idea that Jarrah was on a CIA watch list. If he had, experts say it is possible he might have prevented or at least disrupted the worst terrorist attack in history. About 2 years later, Maryland opened its Coordination and Analysis Center, an intelligence fusion center designed to pool and analyze information from federal, state, and local sources in an effort to get vital information to the police officers who every day patrol the home front of the quote-unquote war on terror. So now all these years later, we can see how, like, okay, this was, and I even wonder, like, did this traffic stop even happen? What are the real records? What's the real, maybe it did. I don't know.
Kurt Weldon was talking about fusion centers right after 93.
Of course. He was ready 8 years early, but it was just, they were, the World Trade Center bombing of 1993 didn't get the go. It didn't have the juice. The horses to start. It was a false start. We don't have the juice on this, guys. We're going to have to hold. We're going to have to pull back. We're going to have to wait. And then 9/11, they weren't going to mess. They weren't going to fail twice with 9/11. So they made sure to rig it with explosives every building they could find, right? Whatever, we don't need to go into all the details of that. Other than they weren't going to fail with 9/11. They were going to be sure that after 9/11, they were ready to roll out, the plan. And they did. And the fusion centers were part of it, obviously a big part of it, and here we are.
And a big part of this is Enron, because Enron was the company that George Bush had, right, that was going to have these surreptitious pipelines. And Unocal, right, they were going to have the pipeline of the oil out of Afghanistan. They were going to do the pipeline through Pakistan so that the Chinese could be supplied oil from the Indian Ocean. They were going to have the pipeline through Iran to Baluchistan. That was going to come out of the Baku and go, into the boot of Italy or the calf of Italy. All this was the imagination, right, of the Atlantic Council, the Jim Woolsey, all the people he quotes as his best friends are all the architects of how do we put the straw into the Russian milkshake, right? They're all the key guys who said, wait a minute, we don't want to blow up the milkshake. We want to drain the milkshake, right? We got to stop talking about blowing up the milkshake and start talking about draining the milkshake. Here we go.
So we will. So we'll play it here. We'll play about 3 or 4 minutes.
I would go Tucker, kind of.
Yeah, the salutations. I was going to try to skip a little bit through the
Yeah,
salutations.
get to the right there. Yeah, there you
Here
go.
We'll start from right here. We'll play about 3 minutes of this, and then we're going to come back and discuss some of the new information and news on the health front, on the FDA fast track approvals, which we don't like those. But here, hold on, we're going to play this, and we'll be come back to you in a couple minutes.
You was right around 2006, and you had been a frequent guest on the show that I was hosting then, and I read that the FBI had raided your daughter's house, and I thought, man, I always like Kurt Weldon. I guess he's corrupt. And then I never heard anything about it. And then you lost that election to a guy who I always thought was kind of repulsive. And then probably 15 years passed, and I thought to myself, wait a second, Kurt Weldon was the only Republican I'm aware of who criticized the U.S. response, the intel agency's response to 9/11, who wrote a book blaming elements of the U.S. government for allowing 9/11 to happen and then covering it up. And then right on the cusp of becoming, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, the FBI raids your daughter's house and you lose an election in which your opponent has funding from all over the United States. No one's ever heard of this guy. He's got more money and you're out of Congress. And I began to think maybe this was a setup. So I thought I would ask you.
Well, it definitely was. And you're always one of my heroes. I enjoyed your show with Paul Bagala and when I did Hannity
many years ago,
all the others, and enjoyed. And I was always, I took my work very seriously. I'm a teacher by profession, youngest of 9 kids, firefighter as a volunteer all my life. And that's my devotion even to this day. I don't get any money for it, but it's what I'm committed to and why I care about 9/11 so much. I was at 9/11. I was not 9/11. I was at Trade Center in 93 at the invitation of Fire Commissioner Howard Safer to go up there and learn about what had occurred the first time they attacked us. And they introduced me to a young fire officer, former Marine, 5 kids, named Ray Downey. He became one of my best friends. Ray told me what he thought we should do. I took his advice seriously and wrote the legislation to create the Gilmore Commission. The Gilmore Commission was chaired by Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore, a man of integrity. I had him on a podcast last September for 20 minutes. And the Gilmore Commission's recommendations were largely what the 9/11 Commission took credit for after the fact. One of those recommendations was to have a fusion center of intelligence be put together. At the time I was doing this on behalf of the firefighters to deal with disasters, I was in the position to oversee the funding as the chairman of all military research and technology funding, about $180 billion. The services were building information dominant centers. The Army's was at Fort Belvoir, and I would go down there regularly and meet with them, and we became good friends. I didn't bother getting right into the program. I didn't need to, but I knew what they were using with new software like Starlight and Spires and Fusion and data mining and analysis and link analysis. This was going to be important to prevent what happened in 93.
Yes.
So I supported
Which was the first bombing of the World Trade
first
Center.
bombing.
Right.
And
There you have it. I think right there, that kind of encapsulates a lot of what we've discussed.
Starlight inspires, this is right. This is all Vietnam era stuff. This is all Rand Corporation. Rand built their own computer, if you remember, so they used to call it the pneumoniac. They had it in the basement. It was 55 degrees, back in the days when, they needed to water cool these things. So this is all counterterrorism stuff from Vietnam. And this is all repurposing of all these white papers that Rand Corporation had. These are all programs that were written for IBM mainframes, for crying out loud. And they moved it over to the DEC. If you remember, the DEC was the first platform where Promise software was. This is the Richard Armitage era, the DEC era, when they moved from the mainframe to the mini computers at Fort Belvoir. And then it became Palantir. They had different programs, but this is the precursor to Snowden, where it was collected all. Right. They were first taking the NSA call data records, and they were first just analyzing the metadata. I called Aaron Adler, I called Mark Buckley, and then, they've called 500 times to each other, and now they're calling each other more frequently. What the heck's going on? Are they going to put in a Beach Boys concert room in the Metroplex Center there in Lambertville? I mean, it sounds like they're going to, put in the Beach Boys Center. Right. That's the analysis that they did. But then as they got more into being able to get the inside the call, inside the records, texting made it easy because texting did it. But I was involved with some SunFed programs, not directly, but tangentially, where they were trying to read and then interpret everything into English from inside the call. And they first said, oh, we're going to do Muslim terrorists, but their eventual program was to get all of the calls. This is before texting, right, into the database for these, for Spires and the other program he's talking about, Starlight, right? And Bill Binney talked about this. And this becomes later, the Prism software that Snowden talks about, capture it all. And you could just see where, and this is nothing new as far as capturing phone calls. It goes back to Oswald in the Mexico City with Frank Sturgis and all those guys collecting all the calls. And then, in 73 with Allende and Pinochet. It's nothing new here, but you can see it's just a progression of, hey, let's collect more. Let's collect it all. Let's do these fusion centers. Let's do these electronic dossiers. And it's now Palantir has taken this over.
This is a really old program. I mean, Operation Starlight, a SIGINT success story. U.S. forces' first major victory over the Viet Cong in August 1965 was touched off by a DF shot that showed the enemy in a vulnerable position. So,
yeah, and that SIGINT, the signals intercept there, is probably talking more about a radio intercept. But the idea of
part of Operation Starlight, still the same Operation Starlight that we're talking about.
Correct.
Okay.
But then the big idea was, let's put it into a database. Let's put it into a database and see if there are words they use more frequently. This is what I was working on when I was at HP, that they use more frequently than they normally would. How often does a normal Vietnamese person say hooch? Let's just take the word hooch. And now this one over here is hoochie, 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 coochie. It's like there's some kind of code word there for hoochie, 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 coochie. Is it a command post? Right. And remember, the code talkers had words, that they would use for tank and so forth. And so the whole idea about, hey, let's put this into analysis. This is all Fort Belvoir, INSCOM, before it gets moved over to NSA. NSA is created after World War II, which again is a recommendation of the Rand Corporation to do this kind of signals intercept, signals analysis. But Spires and Starlight all come out of the Vietnam War. Bob Mueller, right? The guy, Tom Ridge. And so you could just see, and he's talking about Ron Davies, Special Forces guy. There it is, INSCOM. Yeah, it goes back to Vietnam.
History of them, yeah.
But the whole 93 thing where Ray Davies that ran that operation? Why are you sending, right, the guy who's doing the defense research budget, $180 million budget? Why are you sending him up there to talk to Ray Davies? Because you want to fund the Gilmore Commission. You want to come up with a commission. You want to get this idea of these centers, these fusion centers, inculcated into the American surveillance complex.
The Gilmore Commission, when you look it up, the Rand website is is the first hit here, thankfully.
Donald Rumsfeld was from Rand Corporation, right?
Mhm.
All of his acolytes were all Rand. Wolfowitz, Pearl, Pipes was a protege of Pearl. All these guys who were doing all the wargaming, the nuclear wargaming, they all had this moment where, hey, the Soviet Union is going to collapse. And if we keep pushing Reagan because Reagan's an ideologue, if we keep pushing him, he's going to try to do first strike. And then we're screwed, because then all of our oil fields will be charred radiation embers. And that's when you had to do Chernobyl. You had to show Reagan the horrid face. You had to show him the burning face. They also did The Day After. Remember, they did the movie The Day After to show the horrid face of nuclear war. And that really affected Reagan. Reagan was like, oh, I don't want to be the guy who does this to all these kids and children. And that really softened Reagan. Then remember, he came out with the Ivan and Ivana speech. He said, oh, you could imagine one of our families sitting down and breaking a bowl of borscht with Ivan and Ilyana. And he softened after Chernobyl. They had to soften him, right? So Chernobyl probably was a softening exercise for both Gorbachev, because Gorbachev was a protege of Andropov, right? And he was a hardliner.
Well, remember Reagan went to Iceland, and they met over there, and then like Reagan and his entourage just steamed off and left, and seemingly it was shortly thereafter that Russia became, it just fell.
Yeah, I think the first one was Iceland, where it was a little fraught.
1986.
Yeah, it was just and they didn't deal with anything,
But they followed that up really quickly, and I can't remember where the summit was. They followed it up really quickly, and after Chernobyl. And after Chernobyl, it was a much softer, compliant Reagan, because they realized, hey, this thing's going to collapse, and we don't want any day after, because we can't pump the oil out of there. Yeah. So that's when there's this real outreach, SAFRA and money plane and all that. All the insiders were seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, there's a huge economic opportunity here if we play our cards right. We just got to, tamp Reagan down long enough. And Bush was kind of the transition president to do that after Bush took over. And then Clinton was a groomed protege of Bush, right? And now we're and when they couldn't get in 93, when they couldn't, Janet Reno and everything, when they couldn't get what they wanted for locking down the U.S. Constitution and abandoning the U.S. Constitution, they did presidential decision directives, PDD, and Reagan signed like 40 presidential decision directives to bring in the deep state, because they couldn't get this fusion center thing through. This legislation that he wrote in 93, that Kurt Weldon wrote, didn't get passed because people said it was too great of an encroachment on the rights of the American people.
I remember in grade school we had like what's called Weekly Reader, and I remember back in grade school getting one of these, and it was when they were building the World Trade Center. And the picture there, was of the contractors spraying the structural steel with asbestos, as they were putting the building up. So, because you wouldn't want a building that tall to catch on fire. So you make it completely fireproof. And I always wondered if that asbestos and the way that things changed regarding asbestos, if it would be impossible to mitigate the asbestos that was in that building. And if that might have been part of the
reason for taking it down. Yes.
Taking it down.
Yes. There was the remediation. Silverstein was looking at the remediation of the asbestos was going to cost more than the cost of building the buildings.
Because
The
they
rem-
sprayed it on the steel as they put it up, you know,
Yeah.
and so
Rem-
it's
and it wasn't sealed. It was open. The asbestos, I've been to the World Trade Center a lot, right? It was open. And so the remediation for the asbestos was going to cost more than the building of it. And then they decided, holy hell, what are we going to do? And that's when they,
how much
and,
asbestos got sprayed into Manhattan that day.
oh God, it was all over the place, right? So, and then the pulling of Building 7, you know, Richard Gage talks about this, you know, where it's literally, if you drop the bowling ball in free fall at the same time of the roof line, it falls just as fast. So that, and there's 96 columns in the thing, and they're all reinforced steel. And you know, fire. Talk to any of the people, right? This is the thing that they, toward the end of their discussion, Weldon and Tucker get into after denying. Remember, Tucker's denying 9/11. He's calling everybody an idiot and a kook in 2006, right? Which he says in the interview. Regular fire, there's never been a fire that's melted steel in a structure like this ever. It's not hot enough, right? So they finally kind of like, well, you know, I think those, you know, there's something to that Building 7 thing. And then he even quotes Bravo 7. Kurt Weldon quotes the movie Bravo 7, where they talk about this. They show you the actual 96 columns, and they show you the reinforcement. They show you there's no way that the building could fall in free fall unless it had been pre-dynamited. Tucker, you were the one calling everybody a nutcase. He was the one who called people nutcases for saying that in 2006.
Yeah. Well, you know, I heard another rumor too about that Building 7, that there was like $200 billion in treasury bills that were maturing the following day that were destroyed in that destruction.
Well, and there was some missing gold in WTC1, if you remember, that got moved. And then there was a whole bunch of trades that occurred, shorting various stock right before the building collapsed. And P-Tech, the whole P-Tech thing, which, you know, top secret clearance across every DoD agency, and also FAA top secret clearance, and they're going through all the records of all the companies 2 months before the WTC disaster. This is where Task Force, my partner, was all over this. We went out and knocked on the doors of P-Tech in Washington, D.C., where they were training the people to make the bombs. They gave them encrypted communication. OSCE gave them the encrypted communication through Jack Lew. This is how it happened.
What's that funny triangular symbol? Where have I seen that before?
Well, it's
What, this P-Tech thing?
Yeah.
he's talking about the Pizzagate.
Oh, that triangle. Well,
Well,
Yeah.
was a pizza attacker that was, you know, I don't know. I'm just curious. You know,
we'll let that one hang out there. We'll let this. So as we switch gears here, we'll leave Kurt Weldon and Tucker there. We can't wait to see the next Tucker interview that he marches out after Soon Shong and Kurt Weldon. We can only guess what's next from Tucker. But
I want to do a follow-up on this one, Aaron, next week. I want to definitely keep following this up, because this is just like Dr. Soon Shong, and I know that's where we're going. He gave his presentation yesterday here. So I'll just stop. Go ahead.
George.
We got to follow up and keep following up on this, because these things don't end when they finish their interview.
George, how do you unscramble an egg?
Well, okay.
Exactly.
So actually, we were going to talk Arcturus here. Arcturus Therapeutics.
Yeah.
Not necessarily Soon Shong. Shong's presentation. I guess I didn't have that queued up. I had Arcturus queued up.
Well, Arcturus is good because these are the people who have the mRNA for H5N1, right?
I'll read here what was in the news. So this was in the news just a couple days ago. I'll read from their website, their press release here from April 10th. Arcturus Therapeutics Holdings, a commercial messenger. Arcturus Therapeutics Holdings Inc., the company Arcturus, a commercial messenger RNA medicine company focused on the development of infectious disease vaccines and opportunities within liver and respiratory rare diseases, today announced that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has granted fast track designation for self-amplifying mRNA vaccine candidate ARCT-2304, designed for active immunization to protect against disease caused by influenza A H5N1, that's that bird flu subtype contained in the vaccine. This designation recognizes the potential of ARCT-2304 as an innovative approach to address unmet medical needs for the prevention of disease caused by pandemic influenza A virus H5N1, a significant global health risk. The phase 1 clinical study initiated November 2024. So we won't read the whole thing, but I mean, here we are, folks. The bird flu now, we've gone into the bird flu phase, and they are fast tracking mRNA vaccines for bird flu. And so while this did not make mainstream news, and I don't really see anybody else talking about it, that's why you're here in our research community, because this is where we talk about this kind of stuff. And yeah, it's here we are again. So what did you want to, do you want to,
Yeah.
there you go.
I think again, we don't follow the news because the news is sort of contrived, right? We follow the metadata, right? Or meta news, which is what are the key things that the deep state does that telegraphs what they're going to do, right? And this is the big thing here is cold chain. If you remember, the knockdown on the coronavirus with the lipid nanoparticle was it needed to be kept so cold. I can't remember which, but like it was like sub-zero almost. I mean, way below sub-zero, but like almost to absolute zero with liquid nitrogen freezing and so forth for the cold chain. This new program here is much more a regular doctor's office type refrigerator type cold chain so what you're really trying to introduce here, and they need to come up with some kind of emergency so that the U.S. government will pay for it, right? So you have to have a mass formation psychosis.
Well, the bird flu is what they're pushing for, I guess. Obviously,
right. So what I'm saying is, if it's bird flu, monkeypox, whatever, you've got to have
zoonotic.
You've got to have some kind of mass formation psychosis in order for the government to pay for it. If you're a part of the Atlantic Council and you own the STAR technology, you've got the patents for this cold chain where it's not as cold, right? And you want to commercialize this stuff, you got to have a mass formation psychosis, right? So let's do bird flu. We've got the Erasmus lab. It's right on the shelf. We'll infect some workers, which has already happened in the poultry chain. We'll infect some workers in the cow chain potentially. We'll inoculate every one of the people in the food industry, right? We'll have a cull. We'll cull a whole bunch of people. Yeah, why don't we watch the article?
No, I was
following up.
Hold on, we will in a second.
Go ahead and play that. But my point is,
we will in a second. We'll get it there. I didn't mean to bring the volume.
My point is, it's a stair step, right? We had the super cold for the lipid nanoparticle mRNA. It didn't work. It fell apart. Right now, we're ready to go to the doctor's office refrigerator level. They need a emergency use authorization, absolutely, and they're going to get it. Here we go.
Oh, well, here. So they have actually a couple videos we will play. Let's watch a couple of these. I'll cue them up here. It really dives into their technology. I guess I didn't know. I guess I can't pause it when I press it from there. Once I press the button, it's going to play.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Of their STAR technology, it's called STARR. Just, it's all about these fat bubbles, man. Just like last time, like you said, it was that fat bubble, that lipid bubble that they were able to put everything in that makes the magic work. So here, I guess we will play this first one. We'll do the STAR technology and lunar technology, and notice they're both capitalized because they're acronyms for something, but it's like, give me a break, just Arcturus and STAR and lunar and all of these like space motifs. Just gag me, you know. I mean, we're all we're all being brought into the new space universe, whether we like it or not. Or just the universe of space is our future, and we better like it. So here you go, Star Technology from Arcturus Therapeutics.
Following uptake of the lunar particle by the target cells, STAR, self-amplifying RNA, is released into the cytoplasm through the action of proprietary components of the lunar particle. The mRNA is translated into protein by the cell's ribosomes, producing the desired protein. Unlike conventional mRNA, STAR includes a replicase gene, which amplifies the mRNA and increases the amount of protein produced. Self-amplifying RNA protein production is estimated to be 30 times greater than conventional mRNA, leading to higher and longer protein expression compared to a similar dose of conventional mRNA, and a broader and more responsive antibody profile.
And there you have that one. So you see, we are already 30 times higher, folks. From COVID mRNA vaccines, we are now accelerating to 30 times the power, as if we didn't, know that they were just using COVID to
And
launch this and now ramp it up, But
my first guess is it's the same replicase gene that's blocked with remdesivir. So this, if people don't remember, right before I almost die, I'm 6 days in a row at National Resilience, and National Resilience in San Diego is the people who made the mRNA for Pfizer and Moderna the first time around. And the reason why I was protesting there is saying, hey, watch out for Sun Shang. This is before Sun Shang did the thing with Tucker. But here come the mRNA vaccines, right? They're going to say that either COVID or COVID vaccines cause cancer. And now you have reduced immunity, and now we need to replace your T cells. So here comes T cell replacement therapy. So that's what I was talking about. Then he comes on with a T cell replacement therapy on Tucker, which is pretty prophetic, I think. But in the backyard of National Resilience, they share a putting green with Arcturus. That's how close National Resilience is to Arcturus. They share a putting green in the backyard here, where I was in San Diego.
A putting green, like they have like a little fun area for staff
Yeah,
when they're
yeah,
on their lunch
I believe
break,
it is.
Putt or something.
Yeah. I believe it is. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I envisioned when you said it, or is it like one of those islands in a parking lot, that they have the same grass?
No. It's a grassy area, and I think you can putt a putt from one side of the Arcturus into the National Resilience putting area. That's how close the collaboration is. That's how close the collaboration is with this, and it's so military driven. It's not even funny. But here we go.
Oh well, no, this is National Resilience website, just showing you.
Do the lunar particle.
Oh, we're gonna get to lunar next. Yeah, we did star, so we did star, and now we'll do lunar.
Because when we go to uridine and pseudouridine, remember pseudouridine is the fake thing that won't degrade, and they put pseudouridine in there so that the mRNA would last longer. That's where what they learned in the last thing is what they're going to patent in the next round, right? And that's the lunar thing. So here we go.
There we go. Star. We did star, and now we'll do lunar mechanism of delivery from Arcturus.
Nanoparticle.
The lunar particles carrying the RNA drug travel in the bloodstream to the liver. The lunar technology then sheds the protective surface, allowing the particle to adhere or stick to the membrane of the diseased cell. The delivery technology enters the cell through a process called transfection, resulting in the lunar particle being held inside an endosome. As the endosome ages, it becomes more and more acidic. The acidity activates the lunar particle, resulting in endosome rupture and subsequent release of the RNA drug into the cytoplasm, where nature's machinery takes over. The RNA drug is translated to protein by ribosomes in the cell, which may then replace the missing or deficient protein that is responsible for the patient's disorder.
Kind of like a Tootsie Pop, right? How many licks to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop, or just how much soluble material to get your fat bubble to dissolve to get the medicine in where it needs to be.
Yeah, and this one retraces cancer. This is how or how a virus works, basically using an enclave in the cell to get the food and nutrition, and then when you're ready to, when your army is ready and fed and trained, then it pops and then it spreads. So this is also being talked about for cancer as well. So there's a close linkage here between the virus technology and the cancer technology and the mRNA technology. So, but it's important because by looking just at the metadata and the meta news, I call it, right? You can see the future. Here's Duke and US, the same people who did the coronavirus, right? The one they always hide Duke and US, University of Singapore. And remember, wasn't there somebody involved with Singapore statistics, the national statistical gathering health service for Singapore? I think I remember somebody involved with Singapore statistics that was a armed diplomatic security services person reporting to the head of NATO. But anyway, we don't want to get it.
We don't want to get Scott Pelley on us here again.
We don't want to get Scott Pelley to attack us or Donnie O'Sullivan to attack us. But my point is this is military technology, right? Being developed in a military think tank and a military laboratory that's being rolled out. And then you have to have somebody at Rand Corporation go, how can we get the government to pay for this? How can we get a study out of this? Oh, I got it. We'll infect all these food workers and we'll threaten the supply chain, and we'll have it so that kids, like Mark said, how do you unscramble an egg? Kids won't get their eggs anymore, right? We'll have the little fat kid with the glasses who loves eggs, and we'll have him do a video saying, "Hey, can't get my eggs no more. I miss my eggs." And all of a sudden we'll get this mass formation psychosis, and we'll get everybody handling poultry or dairy this shot, and it's coming. It's going to happen.
And you can see that because this video I'm playing actually is from COVID era. It's a couple years old off their YouTube page, and it's like, just wait, guys. We're gonna let Moderna and Pfizer have this one. Just wait. Wait your turn. You can have the 30 times more powerful mRNA in a couple years. We'll do a bird flu for you. Just sit and wait. Because like they didn't get their COVID-19 vaccine. All of this promotional material here is from their COVID-19 vaccine rollout that never rolled out. But just recycle it a couple years later. Here we are. But before we
it's an inversion though.
Yeah.
Because when I'm good, remember the milkmaid and how the milkmaids were immune to smallpox, and it was somehow through the milkmaids that they were able to develop a smallpox vaccine. This seems like a complete inversion of that story.
I do not know what you're talking about. No,
that's where vaccines come from. The
milkmaids.
Yes. That's where the cow vaccina, the original cowpox vaccine, was the milkmaids were supposedly not getting it because they had cowpox, which was related. And so they decided, we can start taking the pustules out of their hands and then injecting it. There's Mary Susan Humphreys is the person who's kind of the doctor who's kind of blown up this theory where it was talking about how vaccination never really worked. But I won't go there. Susan Humphreys is the expert on this one. You could read a book.
We highlighted her book in previous shows. Throw it up here just so everyone knows what we're talking about. Yeah, that's fascinating. I guess I didn't realize that about the milkmaids. Then this, but so you're saying this is an inversion? What do you mean? Like this is just the same thing happening hundreds of years later?
Well, Mark's saying now they're wanting to vaccinate the people who are working with dairy versus the vaccines coming from the people who work with dairy. You see that's a reversal, right? So
because I see, because they actually took it out of the little pustules in their hand.
Yes.
Oh my God, that's so crazy. Fascinating. Wow. I mean, okay.
It is a reversal, and it's coming. and Bobby Kennedy has to have to figure out, how do I approve this and still look like I'm doing children's health defense, right? So that's what they're arguing about right now. And Peter Marks, I'm sure, who was running the FDA, wanted to push this through. So they're going to have something horrible happen. I don't know if it's going to be measles in Texas or something horrible has to happen to kids. It's because that's the only way you can move the suburban CNN mom, right? Is it's got to be something horrible happening to the kids. And this was proven. You have the measles in Texas right now happening, and that may be the way they go to push this technology, but they're going to push the technology. And what we proved at the Salk Institute is, if you don't start with some horrible thing happening to a child, you're not going to move that CNN mom. You're not going to move them unless you show them in the before CNN mom, it was the Mouseketeer mom. But unless you show that kid in the iron lung looking at the football game sideways, and you don't roll that iron lung out to Soldier Field in the middle of winter, the suburban mom doesn't see it, right? So they're going to have to they're going to have to roll the iron lung out here in order to get this thing through.
Well,
Well, they did the scare with polio. You know, polio was kind of like the COVID of the 1950s.
Yep.
You know, and they'd have these, you know, everything they did in COVID, they did in polio.
I think that's what he's referring to, is this polio event. Yeah. Well, as we bring the research full circle here and we close our Arcturus segment, and then we'll get to our comments, get to a few comments, and close it out there. But you were talking about Casablanca earlier in the week. It was like that song that, like, you know, and I was trying to,
time goes by,
because Mark knows all those old movies. So we were talking about just, you know, where we could kind of come in on the research and chat with you this week and everything. But the research always provides us the answer, because who is the most recent addition to the Arcturus board is Mr. Casablanca himself. I don't know if you caught this one, George. The most recent board member to be included.
Tell me who it is
Moncef Slaoui, our old friend,
yeah,
Moncef.
GSK. Yeah.
Mr. Warp Speed himself. Whenever you need your vaccine fast-tracked, you call Mr. Casablanca.
Yeah, Moncef Slaoui.
Yeah, I think he went from Casablanca to Paris, or maybe that's in the movie.
Yeah.
Maybe
No,
I'm mistaking something.
You're right. He started.
And in the movie, they go Paris to Casablanca or something. I don't know.
They go from yeah.
Rick goes.
Yeah. Yeah,
he doesn't go.
Her husband
Slaoui is from Morocco, and GSK he's been all through. I think this is the guy who administrated all the bioagents in the Arab Spring, right? He was the local operator, you know, doing all the data collection for Arab Spring, but that's how he got into where he is. But Slaoui is another great metadata guy. You know, when they're moving him in there, there's going to be an operation. There's going to be data, right, coming back out of this thing.
I wish I would have followed the stock price. You know, I mean, wherever you see him going, oh, they just brought him onto the board. Bye. You know, I mean, maybe that's.
I see Deb saying, is RFK Jr. compromised? And we did a newsie is a floozy. The reason why they just recently came out and dangled newsie again, even though it's an old news story from October, is the DPICs, right? And Cheryl Hines and so forth. And that's the part that never dropped. That's the other shoe that never dropped, is the DPICs. That's what, and you know, and that's why Cheryl Hines did the shower video with Robert Kennedy Jr. And she put, you know, in the vapor, you know, the shower vapor, the misting of the vapor. That's why Cheryl Hines did the 6, right? And that's why the license plate says 666. Okay. And I'm not sure that's anything to brag about, but anyway,
I wonder, she
That's
was
what.
in the
That's why she did the 6. So like what the Deepak's gonna say. It's gonna be 6. So
We'll start doing comments here. We'll do our so that
Sure.
was so you have Moncef Slawi on the board. We won't sing the Casablanca song. I mean, it's like
You must remember this: a lead is just a lead.
right. You rewrote it for news to be newsy.
Right. It could be news if you try. Right. That old fake news, Danny O'Sullivan, what's his name? Scott Pelley, just keeps on going unless you try. Right. It's true. If you don't become part of this, they win. Go ahead. Sorry, I had to get my. I wouldn't mind if we could somehow take Rick from Rick's Cafe, take Rick Olson playing the piano and playing as time goes by, extract him and the piano that was bought by one of our great Ohio researchers, and then drop it in holographically into the Rick's Cafe we have there in Lambertville. Right. And then bring Claude Rains, the French gendarme, and then bring in Humphrey Bogart in the white dinner jacket, bring in Bergman with the askance hat. And we don't even need to rebuild Rick's Cafe, but you could put on Steve Bannon Oculus, VR viewers, and you would walk in and you would see Rick playing the piano. You would see Claude Rains saying, "Oh, I hope you have your letters of transit." And then Humphrey Bogart would come over to you and say, "What are you doing here? I thought I never told you to come in this place." And then you could have Bergman saying, "I never thought I would see you again." Right? That could be the experience that you have, the VR experience. I'm talking Palmer Luckey with Oculus VR headset. You give the person the VR headset as soon as they come in the door, and then they have this incredible citizen journalist experience. Remember, Casablanca is about citizen journalism. Casablanca is about citizen journalism. Victor is a journalist, right?
Is this it?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is from the movie?
Yes.
Yes.
It says Frank Sinatra. Where's Sinatra? He comes in later.
Well, he sings
No.
it too, so this is going to be a collection of.
Oh, I see that. I maybe
songs.
just got a YouTube that has that on there or something. Okay,
But my point is that Casablanca is about citizen journalism. It's about a freedom fighter from Norway, right? They had to have it Norway because she was Norwegian or Swedish. Bergman was, and she had to, yeah. And there's Rick. And I want the people, our citizen journalists coming in, and this is the Citizen Journalism Cafe. This is Rick.
Yeah, here we are.
This is the only place that you could go. Remember, this was protested by Antifa. This is the only place you could go in all of Africa, all of Europe, where it was safe, where you couldn't persecute the citizen journalists.
A lead is just a lead. You
Now,
could be news if you try.
Go forward a little bit.
I actually never saw this movie. I guess,
It's the best movie of all time. It's about citizen journalism.
Well, and then when
But
I had to bring it up when I saw Moncef Slawi in the research,
But this is what I want that front area of your place to be, is you put the VR headset on and you're dropped into the citizen journalism world of Casablanca, right? And you have Rick, you have our Rick Olson playing as time goes by. It's an amazing experience. Go ahead.
We'd be better as the Blue Parrot, Sydney Greenstreet's tavern there.
You could do the Blue Parrot. With the VR, you could do anything in that front room. You just have to have the chairs, and you have to have somebody holding the arm of the person so that they don't sit on the table. Make sure they sit in the Sydney Greenstreet wicker chair, and then you could have Sydney Greenstreet say, "Hey, we pay money for stories around here," right? So yeah, it's made. You guys have the Hollywood studio space. This is made for VR. You know who else is doing this? Dr. Sun Shang. Dr.
Studios.
At Nant Studios is because they can't figure out what to do with these LCD panels. They're offering these walkthroughs of old movies now.
There you have it. Yeah, I mean, we're like a mini Nant over here. Maybe we can get Soon Sean to invest in this.
With the VR headset, with the Steve Bannon Palmer Lucky VR Oculus headset, anything is possible. The only problem with that is you have to have a chaperone setting people
We're
down.
able to hold everyone's hands. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because you don't want people falling over things. But you sit them down in the Sydney Green Street wicker chair at the Blue Parrot, and you start talking about this is the stuff that dreams are made of. With the Maltese Falcon. Yeah, it's great stuff.
Well, let's do some comments here. Mark's going to go make a pot of coffee, and I'm going to scroll up just about halfway and start doing some comments, and we'll do a few minutes of this and be on our way. Charlie Rose had celebrity spooks. 93 and 9/11 both had evidence and financial record destruction and exfiltration, SDNI, and also World Trade Center 6. So you follow that?
They might mean World Trade Center 7, but that's okay.
Okay. Here from Charles. Francis Drake will find gold for Queen and spank the English.
Spank the Spanish.
Okay. Asbestos dust fortified. Oh, here, let me turn Casablanca off. Asbestos dust fortified with radioactive particles from millions of smoke detectors. Interesting. That must have been in the World Trade Centers there. Oops, Drake captured mass Spanish silver, not as much gold. Okay. Totally PG. Black Rabbit, hello. Tucker jetted across the pond and is in Ireland today. Interesting.
People are saying there's going to be a John Brennan interview. I can't imagine, because Brennan holds an Irish passport. I can't imagine Tucker interviewing John Brennan.
That'd be crazy.
I mean, that is as sellout as you get. But Soon Sean could have set it up, and Kurt Weldon, it's the next shoe to drop if you think about it logically. If the way he's going, continue. I'm sorry.
Oh yes, the Brennans were associated with Scorzani's Irish training camp post World War II, in my opinion. So
that's the Brennan's ancestors. That was before Brennan.
Sure, but I mean, we wouldn't be surprised if it goes back that far.
Well, the English had a training center there for putting down the Irish revolt. So a lot of these psychological methodologies and surveillance technologies were developed for the Troubles in the 70s in Ireland.
And Michelle is a small spherical structure bound by a phospholipid bilayer.
The micelle is basically the natural thing that they're mimicking with nanoparticles. All of a sudden, one day, how does cell-to-cell communication happen? It happens with a micelle, right? Well, you put it in a fat bubble. Oh, hey, what a great idea for drug delivery.
They've been waiting to roll this out for a while, so no doubt there are wonderful aspects of it. It's too bad they had to do a military live exercise to get.
Well, if you think about the why the liver is the filtering organ. So the liver is set up for stuff to stick that shouldn't be in the blood, right? So they're using the liver's ability to then harbor these cells so that they can grow and then be anthrax or whatever. It explodes. Cancer is the same way when it metastasizes, and now it's released out of the liver because it's too small, and now it's into the bloodstream. So
they are playing God through biomimicry. Does feel like that. Don't we feel great with the 6 women astronauts doing a mission without a man? Any comments on that? I guess.
Guess what? It again. You go back to the Kármán line, right? You go back to, if you go into where diplomatic space was, and this goes back to Eisenhower. Eisenhower wanted to get Khrushchev to agree to overflights by the U-2, which is 70,000 feet. And Khrushchev said no, right? This is the whole idea with the U-2 getting shot down, and then the keyhole satellite, the Corona satellite with Richard Bissell. There was already an agreement above the Kármán line that space would be owned by no one. So that allowed Eisenhower to go ahead and say, let's get the keyhole satellite. Let's go ahead and get the Corona satellite for Richard Bissell. Now, what do you need? You need a launch vehicle to get out there. That's where the Atlas V and IB Hale comes in and General Dynamics comes in. We need a multi-stage rocket now to get to outer space that far away from the Earth's gravitational pull, right? So if you get above the Kármán line, all bets are off. That is owned by the CIA, right? If I can give Jeff Bezos a check for $1 billion today, if he can do anything, put anything up above the Kármán line, and these girls did exactly what William Shatner did. It's Alan Shepard, same thing. Just basically go punch through the Kármán line, and now I can write you a $1 billion check for something completely different. If I want to finance AI and AI drones in Ukraine for Jeff Bezos, okay, for Palmer Lucky's cooperative drones, and I need to write a $5 billion check today, all I need to do is send 5 girls into space. Man, this whole thing is such a joke. Anyway, it's Botox is lip Botox is. I mean, it's just about lip Botox. This was the lip Botox flight. And cheek implants and lip Botox was just an advertisement for duck lips. But
quite incredible, yes.
My point is that I only and see Blue Origin has put one vehicle into orbit, I believe. But most of their flights Blue Origin has done, and I've covered a lot of the Blue Origin flights from Cape Canaveral, they've just gone over the Kármán line. When William Shatner had the anagogic experience or something weird happened when he went, across the Kármán line where he went, oh God. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wanted to live through that or hear that again. But anyway, that's all the distance they need to go. They just need to go to the Kármán line. Now I can write a check for anything I want. This is the thing that Trump has to get to. He has to get to the original Q level clearances established by the Department of Energy that Bissell established. Any mission that goes above the Kármán line, I now can write a check for anything else. Now I think it's for AI because Bezos is behind with the Anthropic product, especially in the area of graphics. But Bezos wants to get into AI for the drone warfare as well. They want to keep this war going for 20 years, right? The Ukraine war. So the reason why I think the duck lip thing, the reason why they have the duck lip 10-minute, Kármán line moonshot is to finance Anthropic, because Anthropic's behind. Look at what they've done with Meta. Meta with Zuckerberg, they've also given rocket booster cash infusions to that too. They don't want Elon Musk to be the only game in town with Grok.
Or the only American game in town, I guess.
Because Amazon, my point, you got to look at it data sources wise. We all are on X, and so there's a constant supply of information to feed into the machine, into the AI machine with X. But we also do purchases on Amazon. They want the juice out of all those purchases and the consumer habits and the consumer behavior out of that. They're not getting what they want out of Anthropic right now. It's lagging. Same thing with Facebook. We have a whole bunch of people posting, social map and social relationships on Facebook. We're not getting what we want out of that. Let's give cash infusions to Zuckerberg. Let's give cash infusions to Bezos, right? That's what's happening here. It's not about duck lips. This thing isn't just about duck lips.
Absolutely. We have next comment here, 30 times the shedding. I'm sure that's in reference to the Arcturus star technology, where with a 30 times more powerful mRNA, we're not even sure that the original mRNA at one-time power is safe yet, I guess. But what do you think? 30 times the shedding? I mean, what do you? It's just in your face.
No, I think the replication gene is the key, and what replication gene they decide to put in the lunar thing is going to be interesting for me. I don't know if it's the same gene that's blocked by remdesivir or not, but I'm guessing it would be. But there's a replicase gene. The thing that makes HIV so effective is it carries along the replicase gene that it needs to replicate. It doesn't have to recruit that and harbor that from the host cell. So they took this is the HIV story here. They took a picture out of how HIV replicates for their medicine, for their drug. I'm not saying it's HIV. I'm not saying it's the same replicase gene. I don't know yet, but I am saying that this is how HIV is so effective in replicating, because it carries its own replicase with it. Could be just called replicase. I see Karmadoc says, who wants to meet the head of the construction for the Abilene data center? The Abilene data center is the new Stargate project, right?
Way down there, Mister.
With Larry Ellison. And what Larry Ellison did was he moved all of the data centers, because it got expensive, right? For Oracle, like Microsoft has a cloud platform, Oracle has a cloud platform, and Oracle has decided to move their cloud, or they've already built a couple of data centers in Abilene, I think.
That'd put it just about in the middle of Texas.
Yeah. You can find armadillos near Abilene. Let me tell you, this is not downtown Dallas. This isn't DFW. But my point about Abilene is that they're trying to convince Trump that somehow the Oracle cloud platform for Oracle customers and Oracle data centers, there's some trying to convince him that's GPUs. There's sometimes how to try to convince him that's AI. It has nothing to do with AI. That's traditional database computing, right? So they're trying to get Trump to pay for the GPUs, right, with the Stargate project. And Larry Ellison's caught with his pants down because all of his customers want access to GPUs, and there ain't no GPUs in Abilene, right? So this is the whole Stargate thing. This is the thing that they did with Trump and the meeting at the White House and so forth. So they're trying, Ellison is trying like mad to get the government to pay for his GPU center in Abilene.
Fascinating stuff. Here we say the milkmaids were immune because they were touching cow pus daily. That's why vaccines. Yep. It's crazy. Salk. The big
and
difference.
Isn't it interesting? Pasteur and pasteurization. What's the first thing that he became famous for in France? Anthrax.
Mm-hmm.
They know more about anthrax because of Pasteur and the Pasteur Institute in Paris. And that is always a partner. Pasteur Institute and all these things is a partner because it goes all the way back to anthrax. And I'm talking like 1870s.
Fascinating. Here, we'll get that Institute Pasteur on screen here. Yep. Vaccine.
I visited the Institute Pasteur and talked to a couple of people in Institute Pasteur.
You should watch the movie there with Paul Mooney on Pasteur from the 30s.
Great movie. That's what I'm telling you guys. That front room should just be a place where people can come with the Oculus data. What are they? $600? They're not expensive. You just need a chaperone. Aaron, your kids could easily do the chaperone. You just have to sit people down in the chairs to make sure they don't fall. They have this already in Vegas.
Certainly this year in August, coming up in August. We don't have it all written up yet to put on screen, but
you
we will
walk
be doing
people
this in
into
journalism camp.
You walk people into these old movies
Mm-hmm.
that are all about the stuff we're talking about now, like the life and times of Louis Pasteur. Won, I think, Paul Muni an Academy Award. I'm pretty sure, right? These are great classic movies. They're better than the movies now, right? And it gives your kids something to do after school.
I think it was just Pasteur.
Oh, it's Pasteur. I'm sorry. The story of Pasteur. Oh, that was the title, Pasteur. Okay.
Interesting. Is it this? No, this is just a different thing altogether, I think, here. But okay, so we'll continue on. Let me keep getting the comments on here. Jay Bhattacharya stated mRNA platform should be disbanded. Is RFK Jr. now compromised? We already hit that one earlier. Vaccines have special legal protection.
And I wonder how that is too, because like
when a food product changes its mix, okay, they have to change the labeling on it because it's not the same thing. When they pass laws about a vaccine, you know, and giving them like liability, that was based on a different parameter for vaccines, which to me would make the law not applicable to the new definition of a vaccine. Okay. It's just like if you took the olive oil out of your spaghetti sauce, okay, and now you put soybean oil instead of it, okay. Okay. And now it's your new and improved product or whatever, the way they'll package it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just like, you know, what when the laws were passed, you know, for like giving it, you know, liability protection to vaccines, it was based on what the vaccine, you know, was doing. But now these vaccines are doing different things. So how can that liability protection carry over to what is really a different product?
That's a good point. Yeah,
You know,
it's changed since then.
okay. It's like it's like well, Coke. Well, we just have Diet Coke now. You know, so we can't sell Coke because it's Diet Coke.
We'll put this next comment from Karma Doc up here. Great to see Karma Doc in the chat. Thanks for being here. You want to research something? Research how Dr. Richard Urso, the only honest AFLDS, America's Frontline Doctors doctor, had a massive stroke and his lawyer brother became his guardian, stole his money, and put Deborah Birx on his board. Yikes.
Camera gun.
That's definitely didn't.
Well, Urso, Karma Doc also was an American Frontline Doctor, and she quit because of when she found out about Simone Gold's corruption and diverting the money to jets and mansions and all this stuff. And then Simone Gold is supposedly the hero of January 6th. Let's see. Simone Gold was right there when Joe Biggs and the Orange Hats were jimmying the gates and trying to blame Trump, right? And she was live broadcasting that, right? I wonder who did that. I wonder who exonerated Trump live and blew up the whole false flag and said it was Fourth Psychops and Emily Rainey. Was that Simone Gold? No, I actually don't think so. I think that was us. I think it was Andy Dabala talking to me, and I think I was there, and I think there was some other guys. This is the same deal, right? Urso's one of the real deals. He was a Texas doctor. Maybe we should hear him a little bit. Let's hear him talk a little bit.
I don't know this. I'm not sure what I grabbed here in terms of the video. I was just trying to show his face. And
well, the bottom line, the bottom line here is America's Frontline Doctors was co-opted. It did have real frontline doctors, people who got shot at in Kosovo, like Karma Doc. You know, we've all visited her and we know who she is. And so that's the tough part of this is there are the real deal, and then there are the fakesters who all just want the money. And remember, there was a huge wave of orders for ivermectin and a huge wave of orders for hydroxychloroquine, and they took all the money and bought the jets and bought the mansions and so forth. And now she's trying to say she's the hero of January 6th when we have documentary evidence of me standing there and Joe Biggs going by me, and I'm like on top of the Orange Hats going back and forth with the gates. You know, I mean, it's just like you cannot argue with the video evidence of these things, right? And but yet she's out there every day saying she's the hero of January 6th. Right? She's out there every day with this thing, and Bob Malone's in on this thing. And all the true heroes end up dying, right? They tried to tumor Karma Doc and Urso, I guess. I didn't know Urso was dead.
I think he's had a stroke. It sounds like he's
got a
custodian, like his brother's his custodian.
Oh,
and even she said his brother became his guardian, stole his money, and put Deborah Birx on his board. So we'll have to look into more of that. I did not know any of that. And then his brother's company dealing with air purification, which of course we've got a lot of research on air filters. There's a lot there.
That's how you spread an airborne disease. You know, when the movie Contagion and Dustin Hoffman goes, it's airborne. How do you think it gets airborne unless Swang-Shara Wu puts the air filter in there? Right, that's how it gets airborne. Right, the air blows through the air filter that's been laced with this stuff, with York Air Conditioning and her patent at York Air Conditioning. I digress.
Here's a shout out. Fraud Hodel has a great tweet today. I also love George's reporting on him back in the early part of COVID. Here,
Be interesting to see what Frau Hodel said.
Here is the great Frau Hodel, one of our excellent researchers in the research community. Maybe the best researcher in the community. I don't know if I had to pick one.
Yeah, I'd probably say
He
her.
is pretty awesome. I think it might be in German. Maybe we'd have to translate, which I don't know that I'm able to. Here's here, maybe this one. At Tucker Carlson, what's wrong with you lately? Have you ever been to Windber, Pennsylvania, or at least done the research connecting 9/11 and the Duisburg scholars, one even being from Germany? So yeah, here's she's still talking about the Soon Shong Tucker interview there.
This gives me a chance, really super quick, to talk about. He did the presentation for Anktiva yesterday here in El Segundo. You saw me. I went there the day before because I thought they'd kill me the day of, right? Because they'd say, "Oh, well, he's trying to, do something bad, so they'll go ahead and shoot me on sight." I'd already had the red dot on me from going to the Rand Corporation. But my point here is that he again yesterday didn't mention Anktiva till like all the reporters had gotten their stories and had gone. Right? He kept saying BioShield. He says BioShield 1,000 times. Again, that's dishonest. It's a cancer therapy for bladder cancer that was approved a year ago that might not work without being compared, coupled with BCG. BCG's been around 100 years. It's minimally effective without BCG, a 100-year-old tuberculosis vaccine. So he's not being honest. He's pushing this idea of T-cell replacement therapy, like there's cancer replacement therapy, CART. He's saying TART, T-cell replacement therapy, right? He's trying to create a whole new industry on a failed cancer drug, right? And again, where is the only way you could get away with this? He would be in jail right now if he wasn't military sponsored, because this violates every possible law of investor relations with the SEC and the FDA on how new drugs are rolled out. He would be in jail right now on several felony counts for what he did yesterday in El Segundo, right? Because you have to disclose all this stuff. You have to have that Myers chart, here's with it, and here's the 5-year survivability with it, and here's the 5-year survivability without it. None of that data was presented. Myers Anderson, I can't remember what the juice chart of how many people we save with the Myers curve. None of that was adhered to, and I can't seem to get this through to folks that the only way he could get away with this is Smith-Mundt. The only way he could get away with the BioShield is Smith-Mundt for all the kinds of SEC violations he did yesterday and FDA violations he did yesterday.
Well, and Voice of America, there's so much history with Tucker's dad at Voice of America and the global agency for media, the USGM, the one that what's her name, the one from Arizona, Carrie Lake, the one that Carrie Lake's in charge of now. Those were the only two agencies that were authorized to do domestic propaganda. Was the State Department and then Voice of America, the United States Agency for Global Media.
And I want to do a shout out. I'm sorry.
No,
I know we're way over time.
No, that's okay. We keep going. Yeah.
But I want to do a shout out to John and also A.W. Finnegan, because they did Eric Traub, right? And Eric Traub's favorite virus was the Venezuelan encephalitis, equine encephalitis. And the Nazis somehow took the regular EEE, the equine encephalitis. There's a horse farm where we went and did our rollout, by the way, in Michigan, and a horse training area in central Michigan. But they took the equine encephalitis and created a new serial passage, a new thing in Venezuela. I don't know why they did it in Venezuela, if they were going to try to do microencephaly to try to reduce the population or whatever. But Eric Traub had a Venezuelan version. Well, the replicase that's used in the Arcturus to get the 30 times, production are the 4 nonspecific proteins.
Yikes.
From the Venezuelan encephalitis virus. So not nonspecific protein 1, nonspecific protein 2, NSP3, and NSP4. Those are the 4 proteins from Eric Traub's old, I'm talking about Nazi death camp experiments. He used VEV.
Gun.
Yeah. Eric Traub. I've read the whole Eric Traub story, and A.W. Finnegan's the expert. They used VEV way back in 70 years ago in the Nazi death camp experiments. There was a part of Dachau, and the reason it multiplied so well. It multiplied so well. So the 4 non-specific proteins, the sleeper agent, very good book. He doesn't mention super antigen.
Is it a different book of his? It's the second book, or that's the book?
That's the book.
That's
He
the
doesn't. He doesn't mention the word super antigen once in his book, so it's a little dated. Charles Rixey is the and Billy Bosticson is the juice on the super antigen. He kind of picks up where A.W. Finnegan leaves off, because the super antigenic effect is the thing that's causing all these inflammatory diseases, and then the deregulation, the down regulating of the immune system, because it's somebody that's like the kid who pulls the fire alarm every day. And pretty soon, when the fire alarm rings, everybody stops going and going outside because of the fire, because it'll, instead of creating a specific response of 0.001% of the exact T cell that you need, it creates 20% of the T cells, because the body goes, I've never seen this before. Let's just produce 20%. Let's just, I don't know how big the invasion is going to be, so let's send out 20% of our reserves to go fight it. And that causes inflammation, which eats away at your joints. So you're going to end up with a lot of knee replacements and a lot of shoulder replacements, hip replacements, and so forth. But then the other thing it does is it downregulates your immune response eventually, if you keep hitting it with these super antigenic responses. And that's why Rixey is the juice when it comes to, like I say, A.W. Finnegan didn't talk about it too much. He talked a lot about the people who were responsible for super antigens, like William Patrick III. But Rixey picks up where A.W. Finnegan left off and said, hey, what are these super antigens doing in the vaccine? They're going to cause over a longer period of time of immunity response to be lower and lower and lower, right? And maybe this is the Great Reset, take the world population from 7 billion to 6 billion. Rixey's done a lot of good work here. He showed our group when we were in Michigan 3 different super antigens that were in the vaccine. And I'm talking about like the actual, the nuclear codes, right? He was all the way down to which nuclear residues were in the codes for each one of these super antigens. He had a lot of the SEB, which is a Staphylococcus one. He had the GP120, and then a third one, which I think was the TMPRSS. But anyway, we've been on this. Neighborhood News has been on the tracking this very, very well.
Here, I'm going to speed along here. With the comments, we're coming in slow at the beginning, but they're coming in fast. And I just make it a cigar spot. People come in to buy good cigars. We could do that, Mark. We could consider some
Mark loves
cigars.
Mark loves cigars. That would be a great cigar bar.
Yeah. Humidors. Yep. So Burks joins the board. Richard Urso has a stroke. Very interesting. We'll definitely have to look into that. We haven't followed along with Deborah Burks, the scarf lady, as much lately.
What's the organization that they're speaking of? Are they talking about America's Frontline Doctors?
I don't
Or Richard Urso's on the board?
I think it's a different organization that Urso had. We'll check in here. But Woody Allen sleeper with the Orgasmatron, $200 tickets and a lineup down the block. Interesting. I don't know if I get that reference.
Okay, well, there was this skull cap. Hang on. Go ahead, Mark.
I was thinking of Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Sex, the movie that he did in like 72. Wasn't that part of that?
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. That's in reference to the Oculus. You were saying the Oculus VR and the
skull cap that you wore. It was a skull cap that you wore, which generated this orgasmic experience. Well, the William Shatner experience. Well, the problem is that in the movie,
Sleeper. Okay.
Sleeper, right? Yeah, and we're not going to do that. remember there Woody Allen didn't want to take it off, didn't want to take the skull cap off, and there was a fight. And
Is it this? This is it?
Yeah.
yeah, they had to push him out the door. And I can't remember who the woman is in this picture.
I'll see if I can get the actual clip here or the video, but okay. Now I understand. This is fun when we do comments, it's a little bit of serious, a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
Watch how
Is that
Dr.
Pfeiffer? Is that Michelle Pfeiffer?
Here, we'll continue. Watch how Dr. Urso reacts to comments and testimony of Malone during Senator Johnson's first hearing on COVID. Good point, Kate, says Karma Doc. Yep, he is very much alive and being held captive. Yikes. Maybe we'll try to reach out, get him an interview, or see if we can get him on the show. That's tragic about Dr. Urso's stroke. I didn't know that. Gianni Russo ran Maryland at the Kennedys. They're talking about Marilyn Monroe a little bit in here too. Frau's tweet about Sloughy. Okay. Cancer drug kills the patient. Dr. Malone is big using VEEV. What is VEEV? Do we know? We'll look that one up.
Yes, that's Venezuela equine encephalitis.
Okay, that's right. That makes sense. I would like to learn more about what's happening to support Dr. Urso. Yeah, definitely. We'll have to do a whole little Dr. Urso segment here. Maybe even get Karma Doc to call in. I still don't have a call-in line. We do need, $35 a month as we as we get things going here. So we'll get the $35 a month, unlimited call phone going again.
Well, here's my idea for here's also my idea for Karma Doc is in order to protect her identity, we have a holographic representation, right? Where she is a what do they call those those proxies, those little animated proxies. So she could talk and you can hear her, but it's just an animated proxy. And then she could be a part of this discussion. So I would love to have her input, because I think having a medical doctor who's very deep. I mean, she looked at the plasmid diagram of the shot, with Pfizer and said, "Oh, SV40, that promoter, that's going to cause a lot of cancers." I mean, she made that call in like 10 milliseconds. It would be nice to have a cancer doctor here, and she also knows the ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and she knows the holistic health side. That would be nice to have as a segment at some point.
Absolutely. So the company is called Active
Pure.
Here they are, Active Pure. Wellness begins with the air you breathe. So yeah. So this is his company, which it sounds like she's saying is been captured by.
Oh, right. Burks took this over. Right.
It's so weird that Burks would be here.
Well, but it makes sense to me, because if you put in something, especially when you get these hydrophilic filters filtered down to the really small particles, the viruses are really super small. Not hydrophilic. What am I? Hypoallergenic, right?
Okay.
They're really super small. And they have all these kind of layers, and then there's all these ionization. So they get everything. This is kind of like the stuff they were doing down at UTMB, right? For the zone, for making things biosafety level 4 kind of laboratories. That's what we're talking about. This kind of stuff isn't just your run-of-the-mill air filter. This is the stuff that goes into BSL-4 labs. Well, now let's say you're trying to engineer a leak. Let's say you're trying to create a mass formation psychosis. You need somebody who is on the inside who can make sure that there's a bad batch that goes out to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, right? You have to infiltrate. And if you have a guy who's sitting there going, "Hey, you're the one who did all the illegal, uninformed testing of all the people over at all the special forces, army bases, you and Redfield and Fauci, you're the criminals. You shouldn't be here." Now the guy has a stroke and he's out of the picture, right? And now you bring in Burks to put her on the board, right? The company's probably trying to get money, right? They're probably trying to get funding to be a DoD contractor. And a lot of people on the board are going, "Hey, Burks would be pretty good to have here. She has an inside track with NIH, right?" And you got Urso saying, "Hey, wait a minute. this is the people who did all the uninformed testing for the Army. They did the GP 160 patenting before they knew it cleaved into GP 120 and GP 41. These are the AIDS folks doing South Africa. These are all Rumsfeld. All these people are Rumsfeld people, right? So Urso's probably saying, "Hey, this is the AIDS in Africa thing. We're putting somebody in the board here." And then Health Alteration Committee comes in, and now he's got a stroke.
We all got distracted by the scarf thing. It's so weird. Like I'll tell you, I don't know why all these science companies are hiring her. I would, if I had a scarf company, she would be, like better than Michael Jordan and LeBron James, all in one. I mean, like she should just be a spokesman for a scarf company.
She was. They gave her all those for free.
Well, I think they're all like what is it, the semaphores, where you use a flag, like the coloring of a flag, to communicate with other ships at sea or whatever. I wonder if these scarves somehow were like a semaphore. I don't know what but it's like, was each day, like if we were to go back at the beginning of COVID and look at Burks's scarves and the coloring and the patterns and things, like was there a subliminal messaging in the scarves? Because it's just what's with the scarves. And even here in her picture for the company on the bio, she's got a scarf, I mean, maybe
she's got a scar there or something that she has.
I know, I shouldn't laugh. I mean, it's
Adam's apple.
It's her thing. It's all good. I mean, I wear a hat because I'm bald and I don't want to look like crap on the show, so we've all got the things that we wear, right? So no, not trying to throw too much shade at Deborah Burks, but it's very peculiar.
The base of the mask there, so you don't see it. I don't know.
Very peculiar that she is on this board on Richard Urso's company with the air purification. That is a weird place for her to end up, I would say, after all that we've been through. But a free scarf with each injection. Yes, thank you. Sounds like Dr. Urso has been in serious danger, needs to be protected. Yep. Idaho governor signs bill permitting over-the-counter sales of ivermectin. Interesting stuff there.
Casey Whalen, Dave Pettinger and Casey Whalen both did a great job with the Idaho legislators, and they really brought this out for the Idaho Health Freedom Bill. And you have to give them credit. It's the first place in America that they have this kind of where you can't discriminate based on whether you have a shot or not, or they call it medical intervention. They had the word changed for shots changed to medical intervention. So any medical intervention, whether you've had it or not, Casey Whalen gets the star here for, and then Dave Pettinger also, and then the Carfelt Cancer Center. The Carfelt Cancer Center, Misty Carfelt also was a very big part of this, getting this through. And, it's kind of like one of those things where if one state does it, the other states go, well, why can't we do it? We want to be a place for medical freedom. Let's say you're Montana. We want medical freedom too. Why do we have to go to Idaho to get medical freedom? There's Casey. So, and Dave Pettinger also, and Misty Carfelt, and all of those folks deserve credit, because it's really hard to be the first state to do anything, right? Especially in this area where you're knocking down. Yeah, there's Dave. He did a fantastic spoof on the rhino hunting. He dressed up like the Crocodile Dundee guy, and he wore the netting and everything. I'm looking for rhinos. You got to cut off the food source, and he went through the Idaho state legislator. Oh, there's one right there. And he was just hilarious. And that, through the combination of humor and just lobbying, they got this thing through. It was really an amazing effort by everybody there in Boise.
Absolutely. There's the last comment here. Rapid aging research gave the golden poisonous frog. I don't know, aka AIDS.
People say I'm rapidly aging. I don't think I'm rapidly aging.
As rapid aging docs prove what they did. Okay, interesting. Burks without the scarf. So yeah, there you have it, George. That's all.
That's
for
how you
today.
rapidly. That's how you rapidly age Burke. Is you just take her scarf away. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we will leave it right there for today. We've discussed Dr. Kurt, Dr. Kurt Weldon, or not doctor. Sorry, Doctor, or Congressman, former Congressman Kurt Weldon, in his interview with Tucker. We've discussed Arcturus. Anything else you guys want to throw out there? We did miss the Saturday show, so we owe everybody an hour anyway. So it's good we got to do this here, go a little over, and we'll do Saturday night. Looking all clear for Saturday night. Is that cool with you, George?
Yeah.
Night?
Saturday night is great, and I want to follow up with, and I want to show the slides that Dr. Soon Shong showed yesterday, and show how this, and that's metadata, man. That shit is going to be what we're seeing nationally in 6 months. They have the juice on RFK Jr. And Cheryl Hines wouldn't have did the 6 on the frosty shower door if she wasn't trying to take the juice out of the D-Picks for RFK Jr. and trying to say, you've seen one, you've seen them all kind of thing, is what Cheryl Hines, his wife, was trying to say. But that's what they're holding over RFK Jr. And he just is like, I've already on the hook for the wife committing suicide, because she found the diary which said I had 70 different lovers, right? I'm already on the hook for being, with heroin, right? When I was in my 20s, right? Now I got this in my 70s. I was supposed to be the guy who matured and grew up and grew out of the boyhood dreams and boyhood foibles. And now I got this with Newsy the Floozy.
Did Bobby inherit his dad's voice? Remember, Bobby Kennedy almost was, the senior. The way he talked was always kind of a, he had a voice in his face. You know what I'm saying? And I'm wondering if,
yeah.
And I wondered if RFK Jr. might have tried to not have that voice and ended up with the voice he's got.
I thought it was a vaccine injury. It was what I had heard, but I guess who knows? I don't know.
But because
who's to say?
But just remember, Bobby was kind of the butt of a joke because his voice was kind of mousy.
Choir boy. He had the choir boy voice, and who knows? But McCullough Foundation reports 37% of life reductions since the vax. Well, when you have a furin cleavage site in there, it's obviously engineered for a superantigenic effect. And I keep going back to the superantigenic effect. That's the thing that reduces your immunity, and that's the thing that causes the inflammation, and that's the thing that Rixey brought out. And it, and I know Karmadoc knows Rixey well, and that's the part that we need to. It's called dysphonia. Yeah, neurological condition called dysphonia. Well, that's for the neurological condition, but there's also his grandmother Rose Fitzgerald had the same voice issue. Yeah, but that's the same. That's the critical thing. That's the thread we need to keep talking about on this show. So I know we've gone way over 2.5 hours, but it's been fun.
The last announcement I will make, though, actually, is starting next week. We will not be able to run over so much because we're going to be putting protecting the nest back on the air.
Oh, great.
So that'll be Wednesday afternoons. We'll do our show here with you, George, these Wednesday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern, and then probably 2 p.m. Eastern. So we'll do our show, end it. And then about an hour later, we'll have Tara, the great Tara Star, and Carol. Amber, I think Amber's going to be more of a, fill in kind of, a quick segment from Amber of just all the news, and then she'll drop away and it'll be Tara and Carol, but that show will be coming at you soon. So
you're talking about the Bernie grandmothers.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Bernie grandmothers, and that just shows you that, our coalition is not centered around any particular party. People say we're right-wing extremists, Donnie O'Sullivan. I'm like, well, what do we do with two Bernie grandmothers? And the key to me about the Bernie grandmothers is they did such great research on Sina Bavari. I just republished my Corona 911 and talked about Sina Bavari having all these startups in Wuhan, having all these Chinese students in Nebraska, how he was writing about how there was going to be a coronavirus breakout in 2018, right? You guys got customers. You guys got customers.
No. Yeah, I was looking for don't worry about it. No, we're good.
But my point is they were the ones who identified Virginia Benassi with WHO getting all the bids.
Carol did, yeah.
DARPA Adapt. Carol did great work there, and also Tara Starr did great work. So plus they made it fun, and they were just 2 of the 12. And that still shook the world. Those are 2 Bernie grandmothers that shook the world with saying live exercise. We had a guy named Tim from Michigan, Upper Peninsula in Michigan, Bay City, Michigan, who said this looks like a military live exercise. Right. And then the next day we have a press release. They didn't say military live exercise, but a military person from 30 years of testing the military illegally, Deborah Birx, and Robert Redfield came on television, and then the Secretary of State said this is a live exercise. Now that's pretty damn good. That's hitting 1,000, right? That's pretty good batting average from those 2 Bernie grandmothers. So they have something to say, and that's why I listen to them.
Here we are last week for those who missed the show last Wednesday. Tara Starr was in the Mark seat, and if you are out there in the world and you want to join us on a Wednesday, just come up here to the Metroplex in Lambertville, Michigan, up here or down here or over here. Most people would be coming up, theoretically, but but not all. You can come here, 8015 Summerfield. You can sit right here, be on the show, and we'll have more shows coming at you. We'll be doing book readings and other things once we get our feet under us here, but we wanted to be sure to get the investigative journalism back on the map with you, George, while we get into spring here. So we do have some more comments coming, but I think we'll just let those go. And
well, I want to put those up. Just I know you don't want. We're over.
Good.
But Karma Doc's talking about the solar farms.
Oh yeah.
And again, she's a real farmer. She has 79 acres or 80 acres or something like that. A fairly good chunk of land that she has to farm, right? And so real farmers are the ones that are in the best position to call out a tax dodge when they see one, right? And what they're trying to do, right, is to encourage farmers to take their land out of production and then put in these solar panels that are going to be, come and go, right? But what they want to do is break the cycle of like Karma Doc's parents were farmers, right? And with all the farm equipment, and then they show their kids how to use the farm equipment and so on and so forth. And that's how the farm stays in production. Well, BlackRock can't buy it if you're making money farming.
But
right?
These solar farms are just demonstrating that you don't need the electric utility anymore. Okay. You can just put up your own device on your own property and make your own energy. So when I see, we're going to have this huge, all these solar panels, well, I could just have one in my backyard. Why are you having all of this? And then I have to pay you when I could have it for free going around you. So I look at solar farms and all of that as just like, that's the end of the grid, because you're just showing that we don't need you anymore. You created your own replacement.
Right. But I think where Karma Doc is, I agree with this, but Karma Doc is saying that they're going after the kids of the farmers and saying, oh, you can not do this for providing your power for just your own farm.
That's why we have to stop printing money.
Right. But selling it, this is a BlackRock scheme, right? Where you sell the output of the solar farm back to, they're just buying out the land. You sell the farm, you sell the energy back to the grid. So what BlackRock comes in and does to the kid, or, what is that? 4th Street or 1st Street or whatever the other one is. There's 3 of them. They come in and say, you can leave the farm. Now,
Yeah.
right? You can go off to the city. You're going to get money, right? Or you're going to have money coming at you. And then BlackRock can unplug the solar panels then and take them to the next farm. And that's how they're trying to come up with schemes of buying out the agricultural land. Now, is it because there's oil shale right underneath? Is it just another one of these Rockefeller straw man front buying, schemes? I think that's where Carmadoc's going.
Well, communists don't want private property ownership. You have to go through them. Even if you have a house, it's got to be like something that they gave you because you are compliant and good. But they don't want someone to be able to be independent. And so, I mean, this is what they're doing with these coffin houses. And it's like they're going to make it impossible for you to own a house. And now they're going to use insurance and every other thing where, well, you can't afford the insurance on the property anymore. So, well, we can't give you a mortgage, so you can't own it, and you'll just have to rent from the state. That's what's going on here.
Right. Agenda 21 is what we're saying, or Agenda 2030.
Mhm.
And we're going to be in Michigan in August, and we're setting up the caravans. We're going to have some field where the caravans come in. We're going to have a big Michigan jamboree in August, somewhere close to the Summer Field and Secor there where you guys are.
Oh yeah.
So, Aaron and Aaron will manage the signups, but I'll be there for every week. We have more than 12 people, right? So if there's 12 people that want to go at this issue and go at holistic health and go at the cancer and go at all these issues, I will come, but I can't come just yet. I got to
keep getting that lung healthy.
Yeah, I've got to finish up here in Southern California and get the lung back. But
Mark
I will
calendar for the summer, August here.
August, and we'll start
July, August. Mostly August.
If we fill up August, I'll come toward the end of July. We'll add weeks if the interest is there. But I think for right now, August in Michigan, you can't have a better time in Michigan than August.
Absolutely. So here we'll let you give your comments on the Michigan news, the fun Michigan news that's been going on. Just you saw Trump invited Whitmer into the White House and she was there. So just I don't know any comments on Trump and his invitations, who he's been seen with.
Well, they're trying to reach out. They're trying to reach out and saying, okay, we understand there is pushback in Michigan, right? And she was going to say, look, Trump put in the tariffs. This is why we wanted your place to be the tariff listening center. And we wanted to communicate to Trump that, maybe too many tariffs too fast might be too much for the economy. But the first thing they did was lay off 600 people. The Dutch company that owns Jeep laid off 600 people, and that's right, a mile from where you guys are. In the Jeep production line. 600 people got pink slips. Now that's not good, because that's American jobs that just went out the door for Jeep in right before the summer, where people, really start thinking about buying Jeeps. So she stood off to the side to show that she didn't want to be filmed, with Trump and so forth. But they're trying to show inclusiveness, and support for the tariffs. I think it fell short because she was hiding, kind of over in the corner. So she could say she was there, but not there. I think, I don't want to get into the tariffs too much, but I think number one, we were there at the Dark Manga Studios. We were there around the clock, pushing for Trump, because he went to the Detroit Auto Club and said, hey, Ford F-150s shouldn't have a 37% tariff in China. The Chinese cars should be tariffed the equal amount. That doesn't mean put a blanket 67% tariff and not inform anybody that you're going to do that and just walk out with a reader board and just say 67% China. That threw the market into shock. And what we said is, look, if you have an objective, and let's say it's at Ford F-150s, say, look, this is my problem, and we're going to put a tariff on all Chinese made cars until the tariff comes down on Ford F-150s. I think everybody would have been fine with that. But walking out with the 67% general tariff, and there's so much of our supply chain that depends on Chinese products. That was a market shock. And I think the Howard Lutnicks of 9/11 profited, and the Bessents profited. He's the guy who crashed the British pound for Soros in 92. These are people who trade in currency fluctuation. That's how they make their money, right? So they love Trump running out there saying 67% and shocking the world, right? Rather than, hey, we're going to have a 25% tariff on Chinese car products until the Ford F-150 or whatever we're trying to sell there, all the U.S. cars, until the tariffs come down. And the same thing for Mexico. If we have some kind of political agenda that says immigration, the Mexicans are not doing enough to stop immigration, so we're going to put a 25% tariff on all your products, right? That to me makes sense as well, but not Canada. We don't have illegal immigration from Canada. They only come here to buy alcohol, and then they go back over the border.
Stores, yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm saying is, if you're going to do tariffs, be very clear of what your objective is, what your political objective is, and say it'll be removed when that political objective is achieved. But, here's Benny Johnson, laughing at this video of everybody dressed in like a United Nations fashion show where everybody has a different tariff, 47%, and then somebody else is wearing, and there's 82 nations that are in this parade of nations with all these different tariffs. And Benny Johnson's laughing. If I'm trying to sell Teslas, in Fremont, California here, right? Or the Gigafactory where we make the batteries in Sparks, Nevada, I've got to remember and deal with now 160 different countries with 160 different tariffs. You've just taken my job that was normal and straightforward and made it tremendously complex in one day, right? And this is why Elon Musk said to Peter Navarro, who came up with this stupid idea, he said the guy's as dumb as a bag of bricks. Now, I think a bag of hammers would have been more appropriate because you give him a little bit of credit, but this is what Elon Musk brings to the table. Trump never created a product and sold a consumer product internationally. He built and did deals where you had real estate. So tariffs didn't really get into that picture. Right. Here's Navarro, the same guy who allowed a loophole for Chinese students to come into the country, even after Trump put down the trade restrictions to China. Basically,
looking at this, what's been going on here, it's like China is like the focus of this. And it's kind of like forcing the rest of the world, well, which side are you going to be on? You're going to be with us, you're going to be with China. Because that's really our biggest tariff is because we're getting most of the stuff from China. I mean, what do we trade with a lot of the other countries is really not a significant, other than maybe raw materials, the oil and things like that. But it's like this. What do we pay into? It's like 49% of nothing is nothing, and we don't sell the Chinese anything, but we're buying everything from them, and we're buying it with money that has no convertibility. It's just debt, and that's the kind of stuff that's got to be fixed.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. If China's the object of your political objective, say that, right, and then tell them what it's going to be. Tell them you told them, and tell them again. But don't come out with a surprise 67% tariff, and don't come out with 80 tariffs on 80 different countries. The European Union, maybe, but they were surprised too. Everyone was surprised, and it crashed the stock market and for 2 days in a row, and then the third day. And I guess, it's just the kind of thing that Trump didn't need, right? He just didn't need this. I agree with you what you said about China, Mark.
Yeah.
It is like we don't trade anything at all with China, and we have been abused. Make that the focus. But this is why Elon Musk said Peter Navarro was dumber than a box of hammers,
Yeah.
or a bag of bricks, because he made it across the board. And you need a guy like Elon Musk in there who sold things internationally, a consumer product, who can say how much this complicates the life of a person in international sales when you do shit like this, right? I mean, and then what can happen is China then can have, when you go 67% versus 25, they can have, we cranked it up to 125. Now they say, okay, well, we're not going to give you any of the drugs we make. And they make all the drugs for our insulin, drugs, the blood pressure medicine. They make all of our NSAIDs. So now all the suburban wives are going to go crazy, the SSIDs. They make all these things that we are in our supply chain.
Yeah.
And now we're screwed up about 5 million supply chains. So we need a guy like Elon Musk, who's been in international business, who can come in and go, hey, come in and state your objective, focus on that. If it's going to be Chinese auto market, make it Chinese auto market, and stop with the crazy, like let's say you were asked to take over flying a 757 because the pilot had a heart attack. Would you go into the controls of something very complicated and start going like this? It's crazy. As crazy as you could.
Rooney and Buddy Hackett in the airplane.
And start flipping all the buttons and flip. The first thing you do, I'll find out what they are. I'll flip all the buttons. That's what Trump's trade policy has been. What I would do, all right, I would go like this, just like this, and just see what the plane did. And then I would go like this the other way to see what the plane did. I would be so careful. That's how trade policy has to be. And Musk is the guy to listen to on this one. So I'll just leave it at that.
This is the I guess this must be what you're referencing. I'm not going to play the volume here, but
that's Buddy Hackett. He was awfully funny.
Well, there you have it, everyone. Certainly, we will be back at you Saturday night. Might even have another show or two in the meantime. We'll be back with George on Saturday night here on Neighborhood News. And thanks for joining us, George. Please do consider supporting George at both Buy Me a Coffee and Substack. I guess Substack would be the primary place, and Buy Me a Coffee would kind of be the secondary support place. And of course, George's most recent Substack today has Tucker Gone Cray Cray. Recent guests are Sheep Dipped Deep Staters. Please do read that. Check out the Substack. And George, we'll see you Saturday. Any other comments for
nope.
this out?
I'm not done with this Substack yet, so I haven't sent it out yet. But okay. I'm going to do it. But thank you. I'm going to do a deep dive on this, and we're really going to go into this Weldon thing. We're going to, these two Tucker interviews, there's so much deep state juice that it's like going to one of those Fogo de Chao Brazilian all you can eats. We're going to be doing this for a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Well, we will leave it right there. Thank you all for joining us, and see you next time at Neighborhood News.
Thank
Please consider supporting George Webb at substack.com for $8 a month.